Okay, welcome to the 2025 baseball preview. We're going to start in the AL, but before we do, I am your host, Rob Barnhart, and of course, my co-host is Chris. How you doing, Chris?
I'm all right. Chris, Redbeard Videos, hanging out, doing the thing, doing
So,
baseball, hoping for the warm weather.
so before we do some team previews and talk about some of the teams that are around the league, um, let's talk about the big story in Major League Baseball, which is ESPN and Major League Baseball have agreed to part ways on their contract. So that means going into the season, this will be the last season that they have an agreement. As of right now, there is no information if they have an alternative deal or not. I would guess that if you say no to a couple $1 million, you probably have good reason to believe you have an alternative contract to go to, but that remains to be seen. There is some sense in the air that if the contract is not there and they can't at least get close to or better money, then Rob Manfred really screwed up here.
Yeah. So, um, what I think is happening here, without reading into it at all, because I don't know what the offer was, what the deal offered was. Let me see.
They wanted to go lower. They felt
So
ESPN felt that
85 million per season.
yeah,
They're still open to pursuing a deal. Oh wait, hold on. So, reduced rights fees. Deal struck with Apple and Roku. Apple pays 85 million per season for just the Friday night package. And Roku's deal for Sunday afternoon games is 10 million per year. Wow, that's pittance. Um, MLB receives an average of 729 million from Fox and 470 million from Turner. Part of the problem here, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, like the baseball, the facts, Major League Baseball is having a hard time grappling with the idea that they're a regional game now. It's just that simple. And all other sports besides the NFL are going the same route. NBA still has a lot of national coverage, and I think that's mostly because their stars are so prominent, like the LeBron James and Steph Currys of the world. But they're going to have that problem coming up soon when those guys retire. However, MLB is a massively it's popular where it's popular, right? So New York, Mets, Yankees, huge, but nobody gives a crap about the Mets in Colorado. And it's the same thing, like you're an Atlanta Braves fan. So in Atlanta, the Braves are huge, right? But who cares about the Braves in the other division until playoff time? Until playoff time, nobody in the National League cares, or definitely nobody in the American League cares. So I think part of the problem here is that they're going to have to figure out how to make better regional deals as opposed to the national deals. They're not going to get what the NBA just got, which I think was a few $billion. You know what I mean? Like they got NBC just way overpaid for the NBA. And they're looking at that going, well, why don't we get that much? Because they're not as popular anymore. It's just that simple. And it's a popular in-person sport, but on TV, it's just not as popular.
I guess it's hard for them because it's hard for me too. Because growing up as a kid, ESPN, I think of baseball. Like
Yep.
Peter
Peter
Gammons,
Gammons, absolutely.
Buster Olney.
Buster
I mean,
Olney, Harold
there's so
Reynolds.
many names. I mean, I remember being a kid, going to high school, which is quite a while ago, and watching Sports Center, and there was always baseball, and you could stay up to date with roughly what was going on. You got a decent feel of what was going on. And somewhere along the way, especially within the last 10 years, the coverage on ESPN is sparse. It kind of just seemed like they decided, wait a minute, so all this information is already out there. Um, there's no need to really do any hardcore shows, and they lessened and lessened and lessened and lessened and lessened, and it got harder and harder to find straight baseball content,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we're striving to do.
Sure.
Um, and I don't really understand because they had these little big nest things, and then you could kind of find I know for years there's been for specific teams podcasts for just that particular team. So if you really want to get insular, you can, but like there used to be a concept where you get like this wide view of what's going on in baseball, and then like over time that's gone away. So
Well,
I think like maybe like the people in Major League Baseball still see like why can't it be like it was, in the early 2000s and the 90s, where like we have all this coverage of like this, this big push of national stories and stuff like that, and the replays and all that stuff. And then if you really want to get like into granular, you can like do deep dives here, here, and here, and here, and here. And I think they massively misunderstood like who ESPN is now. I mean, ESPN's been cutting their budget since 5 years ago. I mean, like they let Bill Simmons go, they let Dan Le Batard show go. If you read the tea leaves, they're like letting most of their employees go.
yeah.
And that's because, people have cut cable and most of the fees and stuff like that aren't what they used to be. And so the profit margins have changed for ESPN. But the thing about it for me that's confusing is ESPN's trying to move into live games as most of their content, and moving away from like the studio shows of like the last 10 years. Like ever since Around the Horn happened, ESPN slowly moved to like these debate shows and these little insular shows, and away from like live material, away from like Baseball Tonight, or programs that are specifically for each sport and stuff like that. But then like lately it seems like they're moving back to actually nobody's watching these shows live. Maybe they might go viral on the internet for a clip or two, but nobody's actually sitting down and watching these shows live. So we're not getting the ratings we were getting like say 10 years ago. Why would we keep doing this? We what people come to see is the games. So why would they let baseball walk away? I mean, I get it. Like they don't want to pay the money that baseball is asking for, but at the
It's not
same
even
time,
that.
letting them walk away seems crazy.
Well, it's not even that. It's more of a juice is worth the squeeze scenario. I mean, before we went on air here, we were talking about 10,000-foot view. So if you look at the 10,000-foot view, what is the majority, and I do mean majority, of content that's on ESPN whenever? It doesn't matter. Football, NFL. NFL is America's sport, period. It might not be America's pastime, but it's definitely their sport now. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, in this bottom line driven society that we live in right now, this in America, it's all about the bottom line. So what's going to draw eyeballs? Right now, there's only one player in baseball that is guaranteed eyeballs, and even that is a stretch. I think Shohei Ohtani, as much as I hated it and much as he spurned the Mets, being in LA is where he needed to be. If not a Yankee uniform, he needed to be in the Dodgers uniform. And I think Major League Baseball probably made that happen. I'm not trying to be conspiratorial here. I'm just saying it makes sense. It just makes sense. Because if he would have signed with like Milwaukee or like Kansas City or something like that, that would have been disastrous on all levels. So with that in mind, I think baseball is trying to pretend that they're still on NFL's level, because back in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, like we were talking, probably right before Tom Brady was when it changed. When Tom Brady came in, that's when NFL kind of surged ahead for good. Because I remember in the 90s when I was in high school, it was back and forth. It was like summer was baseball, winter was football, and they were equal in their time. Now, if you listen to like any national sports talk radio, they're going to talk about the NFL all fucking year, all year. It doesn't matter. It could be the dead of August. They're not going to. Colin Cowherd is someone I listen to a lot. Never talks baseball. He only talked baseball during the World Series. And that's the second part of this. I think Major League Baseball is trying to strategically capitalize on their biggest World Series ratings in probably several decades with the Yankees and the Dodgers this past year, and they're reading the tea leaves saying, okay, well, we got Juan Soto in New York now. We got Aaron Judge across town in New York. We have Shohei Ohtani and the whole Japanese team in LA. So they're trying to like capitalize on that and go, okay, this might be the last big deal we get. Because that's the reality of it. Like, no one knows what's going to happen, obviously. In 1991, if you would have told me that baseball would have been third in like popularity when it comes to American sports, I would have been shocked.
I mean,
I would have been shocked.
it depends on the person.
And I'll tell you right now,
NASCAR sometimes passes it.
Okay, NASCAR too. I wasn't even counting NASCAR as one of the four majors. I was going just four.
It seems like especially like within the last 3 years since COVID, I mean, NASCAR's kind of weirdly got popular again.
See,
I know for the first time in my life I watched NASCAR because all my life I made fun of NASCAR, and then COVID happened. I'm like, well, I got a lot of free time, so I started watching NASCAR, and I was like, once you watch for a while, you start to realize like how complicated like everything is, and it's really not as simple as they're making left turns. Because like I learned they're off their line by like 2 degrees, they're flipping their car.
Crazy, yeah, it's crazy. I learned to respect NASCAR back in when I worked at Sirius Satellite Radio in the mid 2000s. I produced the post race show for 2 years, so I used to have to interview drivers and all that stuff all the time and collect highlights. So I hate NASCAR. I still to this day, even during the time, but I have a greater understanding of that sport.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. You have to be athletic to be a driver. So
do you think like that baseball then will have trouble getting the contract that they would like to see?
Absolutely. I think they may.
Do you think like it will be such a bad offer that Rob Manfred might catch some flack because it's going to be less than what they were going to get from ESPN?
For the life of me, I don't understand why. So Major League Baseball is the worst when it comes to this TV thing, because like
especially right now, considering like every independent, like with like Bally and all those other companies, like a lot of local deals are up in the air as well.
But it's not even that. It's just stupid. Like, so check this out. So you said before we got on the air that you signed, so by the end of the year, you'll wind up signing up for the season pass and you'll watch all the games and you can watch literally every game, right? I can't.
Well, except for the Pirates, because that's where I live.
Right. But where I live in central Pennsylvania, I cannot watch the Mets on TV unless I pay some exorbitant bullshit to get, pardon my language, but to get a cable type of thing or where the SNY network is available, because it was a deal that was struck between the Yankees and the Phillies or something where the TV rights and Baltimore, because I'm like in the middle of everything. I can't watch the Mets. I cannot. It's blacked out even on the season pass, even on MLB. I paid like $300. Like this was when I first moved here was 2016. So in 2016, I paid whatever the price was, which I think was like $300.
Now it's like more like about 160 if you buy the early season thing.
Yeah. So I go to watch the game, first game of the season. I'm like, oh boy, blacked out. I call MLB. I call them. What is this? And the woman proceeds to explain to me that I cannot watch the Mets no matter what I do, because they're blacked out because of the Phillies and because of the Yankees and I'm like, are you kidding? I said, so I got a refund. And now what I do and what I've always done, honestly, because I always prefer this, especially when it comes to baseball, is that I just bought the radio plan and I listen to every game on the radio. That's it. I just listen to every game stream on the radio because they're the best announcers, period. And then when it comes to playoffs, I buy whatever package I need to watch playoffs, and that's it. I'll try and catch the national games whenever I can. But what I think MLB should do, honestly, because it's such a regional game, is they should just run this shit themselves. Like they should just have their own network. Why don't they have their own network? Why don't they just why don't they play 3 games a day?
They've never handled their own network correctly, in my opinion.
It's a nightmare.
I mean, a few of the shows are kind of interesting, but like all in all, ever since they've launched the thing, I don't think they've ever used that thing correctly. Could you imagine if you could go to MLB Network and watch Grapefruit and like the spring training
They
games,
should have games on all day. They should have
or
they should not only have,
hey,
but they should create
we're
another thing and
we're
do a red
replaying the
zone type
entire
thing.
1995 season
No,
or
but
whatever.
they should do what the NFL does. They should have they have games all day, every day. Make sure there's a game at 1, make sure there's a game at 4, make sure there's a game at 8, and even go as far as West Coast, make sure there's a game at 9:30 all day, every day. And join the games. And you can still have your regional networks because people like their regional announcers, or hire them on and make the network one big thing, and then start another channel where they do a red zone type thing. Wouldn't you watch, like, if they were just flipping from game to game to game to game to game whenever something interesting was happening every day? Every day. Why don't they do this? Why am I not a millionaire coming up with this idea? Like, this seems so dumb to me not to do this, especially when I just read this article and there's 4 or 5 different networks that are carrying these games, and they're every day. It's not like the NFL. We're an event-based society now. So that's why the NFL works. That's why the NFL can have football almost every day, and it still feels like an event, like it's something unique today for some reason. Monday night football, Thursday night football, Sunday, and then later in the season you get the Saturdays, and then Black Friday, and Yellow Wednesday. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Seriously.
So like I guess like right, the question is like who theoretically would be in the race for the baseball rights? I'm guessing some of the streamers might be in. Amazon probably.
Sure.
There seems to be some expert opinion that Apple, who already shows some games, might be interested, and they need, quite frankly, something more substantial to put on their platform.
I mean, Netflix.
I've never heard anybody
Netflix just
talk
started their
about it,
live
but
stuff, so
why not Peacock? Because here's the thing,
NBC.
WWE's about to leave Peacock, and they're going to Netflix, and their deal's about to expire with Peacock as well. So I would guess, theoretically speaking, Netflix might be open to buying those rights and adding everything and putting everything in one spot. Because as of right now, you can watch Raw on Netflix, but you have to go to
Peacock to watch all the other
Peacock
stuff.
to watch the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bit of a, you're helping another company essentially. So I could see them signing with Netflix for that deal. Well, if Peacock loses all that information and that subscriber base that probably doesn't really watch too much of their other material, but probably does at least somewhat, you need to replace it with something. And
They're going to replace
like,
it with
you're
the NBA.
saying,
well, they're going to replace it with the NBA. That's already done. They're going to replace it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, they just bought NBC. Just purchased the rights to the NBA, and they also have NFL as well. So
yeah, I guess I wasn't.
But
sure
I know where you're coming.
How much of their deal was, like, where they're gonna try to bring it to Peacock. But that makes sense if they sign. Like, you're right, they signed that big contract. I'm sure they're gonna try to find ways to utilize Peacock to get as much money out of that that deal as possible. But I mean that could be a possibility. And we're not even thinking of like a TV channel or something like that. Maybe TNT. I don't know.
I mean, so the problem with a channel like that is that they don't generate the revenue anymore. Like, it's they just, you can't count on it. Like, you just can't count on it. So like, Fox is the only one. Fox is kind of the only network out of all the major ones that haven't engaged in some measure of streaming. Like, when you think about it, I mean, they have the Fox Sports app, but
could they do a deal where like theoretically it's Paramount?
So Paramount CBS. So I mean,
okay.
they could, but they have the NFL.
I forget what TNT's thing is. I know like they
have
like,
one. No, I think they're just. I don't think
I know
they have
like
streaming.
You have to like. I remember because when I was watching AEW back like during COVID, you had to go through something if you didn't have a cable thing. They watch it online. And there was like some kind of like, but it wasn't like a streaming platform, but it was like you had to go a specific place online to watch it. So
yeah, no, some of these, I mean, it's like Fox. Fox has Fox Sports. and they
Yeah.
have the app. And if you want to watch something on streaming, you have to go through their app. But it's not like a network like Peacock or Netflix or
That's the only
Amazon.
company I could see is Fox.
I guess it's possible. Fox doesn't. Fox has the NFL. They're heavily NFL, but I don't think they have much else, do they?
But they
I
have a
mean,
lot of
they do
respect for
MLS.
baseball. I mean, there's a lot of figures over at Fox, especially like a lot of their commentators who
Well, they still play games. They
love
have a
baseball.
partial. Yeah, they have a partial contract. They don't have like a full exclusive rights type of thing. And I don't know. I just don't think that's gonna happen. Like I don't know. Maybe they don't replace. I think the best thing for them is to do what I said, which is to just create their own network and broadcast their games. Like, why wouldn't you do that? It doesn't even make sense to me. Like, why
Well,
would you even bother
I
with
guess
anybody else?
I guess the problem with that thought, right, is you're not getting the upfront money, right? Somebody's not
Of
coming
course.
to you and saying, "Hey, I have $1 billion to give you for the baseball rights."
Yeah, of
You're
course.
not gonna get that.
Of course.
You're gonna rely on people like me and you going, "Okay, if all the games are on MLB Network, I'm gonna go ahead and like buy some kind of like, $200 subscription." And you're gonna factor that out to, whoever's really interested, but you're gonna miss like the thing about that idea is that you're gonna kiss like the majority of casuals away. I mean, there's just right now, like Sunday Night Baseball, say what you want about it. Like the minute that ends, it's kind of like sad because like that's kind of one of those they literally set up the schedule so that like whatever important game or some new important game is pretty much always on Sunday Night Baseball, and those two teams get like this big treatment, and that's not going to be there. You know what I mean? That's not going to be there on the MLB Network because it's not going to go to as many eyes. It's not going to be as easily findable if you got to pay a fee up front. Because whether or not people realize it, um, if you have ESPN, you're actually paying for it. You are. It's just not $20 on a credit card. It's over time on your cable bill. So it's kind of like a hidden fee compared to like the like upfront fee of like Netflix and things like that. So people kind of evaluate that a little bit differently, but it'll be interesting.
Well, I think
I
at the
know
end of the
this. If you're right, and they end up signing somewhere for their deal and they get substantially less, I think even if they get less, even if they get what they got from ESPN, I think it'll be viewed as a failure and there'll be a lot of criticism.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, what you hit on the point. You lose that casual. I think they've lost the casual, and I think that's the problem. And I think the tea leaves say that. I think that's what ESPN is seeing and going, yeah. So we're not gonna give you this much money because you're not making that much money. Baseball is still very vibrant in park. Like I went to a Pirates game last year where like they were done. It was like August. It was over. But there was still lots of people in that park. There was still a palpable energy in that park that I found to be, wow, this is what baseball is to me. And I think it's returning to which it came from, which was
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the
Well,
parks.
like I
So
mean the stats reflect that, right? Like it's a no fact that like over the past couple years since COVID, for whatever reason, attendance is like record highs in baseball.
so as it is last season, so I'm looking at this now. So last season, Sunday Night Baseball put up its best numbers since 2019. It was only 25 games. Like we're only talking about 25 games here. We're not
Yeah.
really talking about a lot, which is interesting to me. I thought it was more for some reason. I thought they still did Tuesdays and whatever.
N-
Um,
No,
so an average of only so check this
they
out.
used to do Tuesday night baseball, but
So only 1.5 million viewers per day per game. That's not a lot. That's
no.
that's
Uh,
really not a lot.
I mean, however, that's about where like WWE is sometimes.
Okay,
That's
that makes sense.
that's where some TV shows are nowadays.
Sure. But are
So
they
like
paying
that's like at
but
least
are how much do they
commensurate
pay
to
for
like what
WWE?
some of the big drivers on TV are at now. Now, of course, when you compare it to something like the Super Bowl, it's nothing. But
Well, of
you got to
course,
keep in
everything's
mind, like the
nothing.
numbers of the Super Bowl are vastly different than, say, Week 2, Buccaneers versus the lowly Jets who are like winless. Like
Still
those
picking on my
numbers are going to
Jets,
be
you
vastly
bastard.
different than the Super Bowl.
Don't pick on my
But
Jets.
huh?
Don't pick on my Jets. That's
Uh,
uncalled for. They're
but the
they're
point
a poor
is like it's
victim.
gonna. Nonetheless, I think that's like the big story. I think it'll be interesting to see how deep we go into the season before we get some kind of information of what possibilities there are. I know that when I was listening to people when WE was negotiating for their new destinations this upcoming time, they announced they were leaving. Fox wasn't going to renew the contract. And then like there's like a period of like nothing, and then like, oh, well, maybe this person's like interested, and maybe this person's interested, and then like there was like all these tea leaves, and then boom, out of nowhere, Netflix and stuff like that happened, and you're like, oh, okay. It kind of happened. There was kind of like a lull where there
Right,
wasn't really like information, and then
right.
like then the rumors started to surface of who's in and who's maybe in and who might be out. And then there was pretty shortly between that, a couple months later, the deal was made. So would you say if we hear nothing by All-Star break, that might be a
It might be.
concern?
Yeah, I mean, it might be quietly done. Who knows? It's it's hard to say. And just to go back on some, the reason why I I got distracted for a second here because I was looking up Monday Night Raw ratings, and it more than doubled what the average. Like the January 27th pulled almost 3 million global views on Netflix for Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, well,
So
like NXT is about 1 million viewers, give or
right.
take, week to week.
But the point I'm making
Uh,
is that I don't
yeah.
think what was the WWE deal worth?
Well, Netflix, I know is like it's like
Uh,
10 years,
it's
something
5
billion
billion.
dollars.
So it was
Huh?
5 billion.
Yeah.
5 billion where Netflix would for exclusive rights to the show for the next decade. So for 10
Yeah,
years.
and I know
So 5
USA
5 billion over
paid
10
whatever
years
they
is what
paid
200
for
is what 200
SmackDown.
million?
Something like
500
that.
million? 500
Yeah.
million. So it's 500 million. So and that's roughly what ESPN was paying for Major League Baseball. Honestly, they paid what 550 over 7 years?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I'm
So
not
I
good
mean,
with math. I'll take your
so
word for it.
so that's consistent. I mean, that's within the realm of possibility. I would put MLB ahead of WWE in terms of barely, but I would in
Let's
terms
say
of
All-Star break, we hear Amazon bought the rights for 400 million.
I think 400 million is fair.
Would you say that people around baseball would freak out? Do you think Rob Manfred's job would be in trouble?
I mean, I don't know if first off, Rob Manfred's job should never be in trouble because of the changes he has made to this league have been remarkable. I mean,
You know
some of
what's
them I
funny
love,
about
some of them
that?
I
I was,
hate,
like,
but
listening to, Dale Eberhard show the other day. They're talking about how Rob Manfred was once the worst commissioner in all of sports,
truth
and then now he's the runaway favorite, and
because he
now it's
finally did
actually the
something.
basketball commissioner is viewed as the worst now,
Yeah,
who was viewed as the best, like, a couple years ago. And so, yeah, the prevailing theory is Rob Manfred is viewed much differently than he used to be. But
absolutely. I agree.
but if he costs the league a couple $100 million,
But is he costing the league? Because by all accounts, what Rob Manfred has done has made the league better.
right?
Ratings are up last year. Ratings are way up last year. One of the things, I mean, look, again, I
That's
can
because
only
the
go.
product's more watchable. I
It's
mean,
more
I love
watchable. It's more
baseball. I love
enjoyable.
baseball.
I've always loved baseball, and I don't want it to change either.
I
I
grew
mean,
up as a kid watching baseball,
yes,
and
I agree.
in my house,
Let me show you something.
we have a joke. If you don't like baseball, you are no longer my dad's son. You will be cast off into the nothingness.
So
I mean, for Christmas every year, I got factory sets of tops. So I mean, I lived, breathed, loved baseball. My brother Jake died for the Pirates. I mean, every year rooted for them like you wouldn't believe. And slowly over time, by the time he was 30, he no longer watches baseball like to a large degree because the Pirates beat the love of baseball.
Yeah, yeah, they
But
do.
I mean,
I
but
mean, the
I'm just
clock
saying
is
that
ticking on Paul Skeens, is it not? I mean, come on, let's be real.
let's be honest. He's probably gonna get hurt this year. He's probably gonna get Tommy John surgery. If
God,
it's not this year, it's probably next year.
I hope
And then
not.
it's like,
But
well, what's like?
after watching what happened with Jake DeGrom, I fear for that. I don't want that to happen.
I mean, I don't either, but I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, the numbers of Tommy John surgeries was way up. I mean, it happened to Spencer Strider last year. I mean, he was perfectly healthy. He was looking like a rock star. Looked like he was gonna well on his way to a Hall of Fame career, and then boom.
Yeah, there's got to be something. So people have to figure out what it is that's causing that, because
it's how they're it's the way. Well, we're now off topic, but
not really.
It's essentially the going theory is because they are pitching less innings, they're basically being told throw everything you have into those 6 innings and don't leave anything behind, and
But you know what's weird about that? You know what I don't.
destroying arms.
But you know what I don't understand? It doesn't matter the amount of innings. Usually it's 100 pitches. That's kind of the benchmark for everyone. 100 pitches, done. You're out.
Yeah, but
That's
it
it. You're
used
out.
to be a thing. There used to be a thing. I mean,
Well, they're talking about trying to change rules, so that can't
you look
be a
at the
thing.
90s and you
So,
look at the early 2000s, and the amount of innings pitchers were pitching was way beyond like what a pitcher throws now. And the arms were not nearly as susceptible to injury.
yeah, but
So
they couldn't do what these guys do either. They didn't do. I don't know if they could, but they didn't. I mean, look at what Jake DeGrom did. Let's look at what Jake DeGrom did for a 3-year
I think
period. He is arguably the greatest pitcher of
you
all
can
time.
make an argument
for
in
3
terms of
years.
movement is the difference, right? Like speed. I mean, speed
Well,
was there for the pitchers of the past.
not like this.
Control
Not-
was a lot better too, in my opinion. I
It
mean,
was
look at
better
Greg
then?
Maddux. Yeah,
You
look at
think
Greg
so?
Maddux. Yes, Greg
Well,
Maddux is
yeah, certain
ridiculous.
pitchers, but like look at Nolan Ryan. I see your Greg Maddux, and I raise you Nolan Ryan. Two
I'm
great
just
pitchers, 2 Hall of Famers. Nolan Ryan would walk the ballpark and then strike out 17 batters in a row, whereas Greg Maddux would finish a game in 82 pitches. Like it's
yeah.
just a different game. But like you're talking about, like Jake DeGrom was throwing.
I don't know. I feel like
Jake DeGrom
maybe there's
Jake DeGrom
yeah
was throwing sliders that were 97.
yeah.
He was topping 102 on the regular, like on the
There's a
corner.
reason
Like,
why he was like a annual Cy Young favorite.
I'm so heartbroken about Jake DeGrom. I don't even want to talk about it. But anyway, you were talking about the past and what we grew up on. This might resonate. I don't know. How old are you? Do you mind me asking? How old are you?
40.
Okay,
Well,
so I'm
41 now.
So I got you by like 7 years. So I'm 48 years old. In the 80s, these were huge. I'm not sure about the 90s, but I came across this. My wife is an antique dealer, and so we peruse antique stores all over the country, like all the time. And I came across this, and it's complete, but it's unstuck. Like it's still got the. It's fucking wild, man. This thing.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's got unstuck stickers.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's complete. It's complete, but they're not stuck on. The
You know
dude
what's
just,
crazy
like,
about that
the
though?
dude like
is
taped them on.
somewhere,
It's
some kid
incredible.
got that and somehow resisted. putting the
Yes,
stick in them.
that's exactly what I thought.
It's like, what's wrong with you?
It's like,
I mean,
so my dad used to get me.
I'd be a millionaire if I had never opened any of the gifts my parents ever
Oh
bought
my
me. I
God.
mean,
My-
I had a pretty decent, like, I've had a rough early childhood, but my parents spoiled me pretty good. I mean, I had the Cobra base. I mean, now that's like, if you have it in box, it's like a couple $1,000.
What is
Even
it?
if you the Cobra base, G.I. Joe.
Oh, gotcha.
It
Okay.
was this big, giant, like circular thing.
Yeah.
It's worth a lot of money if you have it in the box, right? And it's even worth a couple $100s if you don't have it in the box.
Right.
And just extrapolate that because I had everything. And my mom threw it all away, because she was like, "This isn't worth anything." But later it was.
Right.
Like,
Well, and no one knew that, but like I knew a guy when I was a teenager. I was 19 years old.
but I never had the willpower to be like, I'm not gonna open this. I'm gonna put this on a shelf somewhere. And like the fact that it's some kids like out there like never open whatever, and then now you later go, that was my favorite toy. Let's go see if it's on eBay. And then sure enough, there's
No.
something sealed in the package, and it's worth this amount of money. You're like, you know what? It's a stupid amount of money, but I'm gonna buy it because it
Yeah.
reminds me of something.
No, I find
That's
it
so
all the time.
crazy.
I just
Well-
started recollecting vinyl because of that, because my mom threw out all my vinyl. So then I started recollecting vinyl about 4 or 5 years ago.
I bought every Topps Factory set since I've been alive.
That's
It
incredible. You know, it's
Took me
sad though.
about $6,000, but yeah, I did.
I say, you know, it's sad. I had 4 Ricky Henderson rookie cards when they were all worth $1,000 each, and I held on to them with the dream that it was going to be like the Babe Ruth
Yeah.
rookie card, and then it just never
then,
happened. Now they're like $50 each at best.
I have a going theory that I want to go now, and I want to buy every preview magazine I've been alive for, because they're like 20.
Previews, got you.
Yeah,
Okay,
they're like
I thought
$20.
they were going pricing magazines.
So,
I remember.
yeah,
Becky's
they're like
pricing
$20
guides.
a
Remember
piece.
those?
So I'm
Remember
like,
those?
you throw a couple $100, I'll have most of the preview magazines that I can get a hold of,
That'd be pretty dope.
and that would be
Cool
like kind of like
collection.
this little window of like my baseball life. But let's get to the main topic, why we're really here. Like, even though we didn't quite land a plane on the thing, but
We did. We
the
came up
fact
with a
of the matter
prediction.
is,
We said roughly Amazon is going. You think that Amazon is going to make an
I think
offer of
I think
400
Apple-
million?
I think Apple will probably
Apple,
step up.
and I think 400 million is a reasonable number comparatively to everything else in the pecking order of things. If the NBA got ridiculous, I don't even know what the NBA, but either way, it's third in the pecking order when it comes to things. And make no mistake, if the World Cup goes well, baseball's in trouble. If the World Cup goes well, the soccer World Cup goes well, baseball's falling a rung. MLS will overtake because it's coming up. It's coming up. They're on Peacock. Speaking of Peacock, they have MLS. So
The thing about soccer is they've been trying this since I was a kid.
but we have a legitimate star in this country right now.
Yeah, he's
And
been
he's in
there
Miami
for
and-
about 2 years.
2 years, and it was huge.
and-
Last year it was big. When he was in
Yeah.
LA, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
So
the thing with soccer is like it's kind of like the equivalent of a Super Bowl every 4 years, and that's just hard to take that momentum and put it over multiple years. It kind of seems like every year there's like a bell curve. Like every 4 years, popularity seems to be like, okay, this is the year, this is the time where soccer's going to take off. And then over time, it slowly fades away again.
I'm sorry, Apple TV has MLS.
But that'll be interesting. I mean,
I think it's going to be interesting.
NASCAR,
NASCAR's interesting.
hockey, and
Hockey will never.
no, I think that they're kind of like regional as well.
People in this country will never. I mean, it was wild to see the Four Nations face off and how people went crazy for that. But that was because of all the political nonsense that was going on with it. So it was less about hockey and more about
It was
USA.
kind of a little. I think there was a little bit of both, but I think what got people there was
Exactly.
the politics.
Exactly.
Then like everybody's like, this is kind of cool.
Because it's awesome. Hockey's
Yeah.
amazing. Like as much as I love baseball, hockey's always, especially playoff hockey, has always been my
One of
favorite
my
sport.
least favorite sports.
Oh my god, I fucking love it. Anyway,
But
spring training.
let's take a look at the AL East. Okay, so let's talk about the perennial favorites, the New York Yankees. the
New
team that I
York
hate- the
Yankees.
team I hate with the fiery passion of 1,000 Suns since the Braves lost back-to-back World Series to them. I'll never forget. I forget which year it was, but Charlie Hayes caught the final out,
96.
thus eliminating the Braves from any chance of winning back-to-back World Series.
And that was
And
96.
me going and ripping every copy of Charlie Hayes I had.
So
I
it wasn't
hate-
the guy
I
who
hate the
popped it up
Yankees.
to third base. It was Charlie Hayes who caught it.
Yeah,
It wasn't
my-
John. It wasn't John Wetland who induced the pop up.
No, it was all Charlie Hayes' fault. I mean, that's the rationality of a
Of a
child.
kid, of course. I get
Yeah.
it. That's why it's funny.
And one of my long-lived dreams that I want to do one day
Just
is
punch
go to
Charlie
New
Hayes in
York.
the face.
No, go to New York and piss on the Bronx Stadium.
Why?
I hate the Yankees. I hate
I
them.
mean, you don't hate
I
the Yankees more than I do. There's no way.
No, I'm
As a
pretty
Mets
sure I
fan, there's
do.
no way.
You don't understand like how often the '90s Yankees like were just a thorn in the side of one of the most dominant teams in the entire history, and nobody cares because they only won one World Series.
Listen.
They won 15 straight divisional championships and
Wow.
one World Series.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter, and
They're
it's largely because the Yankees.
They're lucky they won that one because they'd be the Buffalo Bills of Major League Baseball if they didn't. It's wild to me. And
Listen,
look, I hate the Braves almost.
Indians were awful though.
I hate the Braves almost as much as I hate the Yankees. I hate the Yankees mostly because of the fact that I lived where I lived. I grew up on Long Island, and I had to deal with Yankee fans a lot
So as a Mets fan,
as a Mets fan.
like your view of the Yankees here is going to be interesting because it's impossible not to argue. Everything I've read, everything I've heard is they have not replaced Soto.
Nope.
They're not even trying to somehow Billy Bean their way into replacing him in the aggregate. They're basically punting on that, and they're just trying to defense their way out of it.
Well, what they're doing is they're kind of doing what
I mean,
the
they brought in
Braves
Paul
did.
Goldschmidt.
They're
They
doing what
brought in
they're
Max
kind of doing.
Fried.
They're doing what they didn't. Max Fried, he signed with the Yankees. Max Fried.
Yeah.
Is that true? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
tremendous. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to make their pitching impossible, which is Garrett Cole. That's right, they did. I spaced on that completely. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to do what the Braves did when Acuna went down and they won the World Series that year. They're throwing money and hope and faith into players that were great elsewhere. And maybe not like when the Braves, what was the biggest pickup that year that they won the World Series? Jock Peterson, right? That was like the biggest like catalyst for how great that team wound up being winning that World Series, right? It was Jock Peterson was huge for that team, right? Am I mistaken or?
Yeah, not really. I mean, that year was more of like Acuna and everybody kind of all kind of for like one moment coming together. Like Strider came up that year yeah, I know, but like early in the season,
Right.
he was, I forget at what point he went down, but like he was there at the beginning. Strider came up. Austin Riley was phenomenal. There was like these pieces. It really wasn't Jock Peterson. Peterson was like nice.
I felt like
a
he was
nice addition, but really Osuna was like kind of like the big deal.
Osuna. Okay, yeah. So right. And then that was also the year, didn't Michael Harris come up that year too? And he was
yes,
like
and he was
right.
like lightning in a bottle.
Okay, so same type of thing. So I'm still right in my thinking is that they picked up Paul Goldschmidt, who is a perennial 100 RBI guy until recently, right? Until last year he fell off.
I think that's
done. You got Cody
Bellinger.
You had Cody Bellinger, who had a resurgent year last year, returned to form sort of within reason.
Hoping he can be unlike he's done in his entire career and actually repeat that process.
Maybe it's possible. Then you got
done it.
You got Jazz Chisholm, who they picked up last year, who quietly was there. Like he didn't really make a lot of noise. So you got a full season with him.
He was suddenly a very different player than he was for the Marlins.
It's true, but that might be because change of scenery mid-season. You got a full season with him. So
the question is that repeatable? Will he be that same player?
It depends. Some players can't play in New York. It's just a fact. Like some players just buckle under this pressure. So
I don't know. Jazz strikes me as like the type of person that's not exactly shy about attention.
No, exactly. So that's why
somebody like Greg Maddux or certain players would never do well in New York because they just don't like that kind of they don't want that kind of attention. They wanted to come and do their job and go home. Jazz doesn't strike me as that guy.
No, he doesn't.
Did you
He
see
does
his
not.
team photo?
No, but I'm sure it's
He had
hilarious.
some blinged out, like, ridiculous expensive necklace, and he held it up so it was in the picture. I mean, that's Jazz Chisholm. I don't think he's gonna
So
be I don't think he's gonna sweat criticism in New York.
so what it looks like the Yankees tried to do, to me anyway, is that they really went after pitching hard. Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon returned to form last year. Hopefully he can continue that. Max Fried, who we know is good as long as he can stay healthy, and so we know he's good. Luis Gil,
He's really never had injury
yeah,
issues.
that's what
He's
I
one
mean.
of the
But
more consistent arms in the Braves rotation.
yeah, but that's what I mean. Like you never know, but it's always a
Yeah,
thing. Clark Schmidt, who emerged last year, might be good. And Luis Heel was great last year too. Also emerged.
he's already hurt a little bit.
Yeah, he might be,
So
but and then you have the problem. See, the Yankees have problems. They have Giancarlo Stanton's already down. He's already down, and they need him.
and
They
quite
need him
frankly,
desperately.
let's be honest, he's a rotting corpse. I mean,
Not really. He's a monster when he's healthy, but he's got to be healthy. That's the
but
thing.
that's the thing is when
That's
you're
the thing.
old, being healthy is like the key. And
The
when
one thing.
a former star ages, right, it's not that they're never the person that they used to be. It's that they're less often the person they used to be,
Well,
right?
there's less
So in the
availability
playoffs,
is a
all of a
skill.
sudden, Giancarlo Stanton was the guy from Miami
Yep.
that they
Yep.
signed to that ridiculous contract at the time.
Absolutely.
Now is nothing compared to contracts now. But at the time, that's the guy that they thought they were getting, and they were going to get every time. And
Yeah.
that's never been the guy that they got.
No, I mean
And
because again,
to
availability is a
expect
skill,
that
and
you're
that's
going to
what you
get
get paid for.
I think
So
he's 37 or 38.
he's getting on there. Yeah.
Yeah. To expect him to go out there and be that guy over the entire season is ridiculous.
I think the Yankees are going to win a lot of games 3-1, 4-2, 2-0.
I disagree. I think they're gonna actually miss the playoffs.
Really?
I think the Red Sox
So
did enough. I think the Red Sox did enough. I think the Rays are gonna somehow, some way
because they always do.
get there.
Because they always do.
And I actually think the Blue Jays have a shot.
Well, I think
And let's not even forget the Orioles.
Well, the Orioles are the class of the division in my opinion. They just have to do better in the playoffs. Last year, what you saw was a very young collapse. That was bad. But as far as the Blue Jays go, Junior
Yeah.
Vlad Jr. is going to play his fucking mind off. Pardon my language again. Third one. It's third one. Pardon my language, but he's going to play his mind out. He's going to lose it. He's going to lose his mind.
The thing about the Yankees is,
And then he'll be
obviously the lineup is not the same. It's never gonna be the same. It's just not.
Well, the same
Now
is what?
Aaron
I mean,
Judge doesn't have the
Juan
protection
Soto.
of Juan Soto. They're relying on a lot of youngsters, to maybe all of a sudden be the person that they were hoping that they are, and none of them have so far shown a lot of consistent signs that they are going to be the new Jeters and they're all right. But the thing about
I don't know.
you
got to
they
give.
need their pitching to be good.
Well, that goes
And
for everybody.
Garrett Cole, older. Max Fried's 32. Marcus Stroman's like ancient.
Well,
Carlos
Stroman's a problem.
Rodon's
He wants out. He wants
34.
out. Stroman wants out. So he's a problem.
That's a lot of old arms that count on to get you to carry the team. And now if they were like 30 to 32, 28 to about 32, and all their pitchers were around that age, I could see like your theory here. But like, if the Yankees need the pitching to be good, the likelihood of their starting rotation looking the way it does now by the end of the season is not very good.
I mean, it's, first off, and their bullpen is out of control. Like their bullpen is tops, possibly tops in the major leagues. But
bullpens are extremely unreliable.
Well, yeah, you don't know until you're in it. I mean, how many times have you gone into a season with, wow, our bullpen looks good? Like I'm a Met fan. I feel really, really good about my bullpen this year.
Look at the Braves last
It's
year.
not the
Right?
best, but but we
We
got
left the early season, and there was huge question marks about our bullpen. We made several trades over the season, and our bullpen was fine. It wasn't spectacular, but it was fine. I mean, that's just how it is sometimes. But like I know, like in the past, there's been like I remember listening to David Sampson. He would he when he was running the Marlins, he said it would drive the people in baseball crazy. They'd be like, okay, the bullpen looks phenomenal, blah 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 blah. Look how good they did last season, and then like this guy like loses like everything, and like the whole thing falls apart. And it's the exact same pieces.
Well, this is why bullpen pitchers don't often make the Hall of Fame, because consistency in that position is hard. It's hard. That's why someone like Mariano Rivera was so off the charts, because like for example, like let's take the Yankees right now. Like their closer, they picked up Devin Williams from Milwaukee, arguably the best closing pitcher in baseball last year,
He was
until
31, by the way.
until Pete Alonso came along, and who knows if he's going to be able to shake that nightmare, right? So he may come out this year and not be able to do anything because he's going to have visions of polar bear in his head.
I mean, we've seen yips in the past, but it's pretty rare. So,
Yeah, but he got
in theory,
he got
they're
beat,
they're
he got
rotating
beat
Garrett
doing his
Cole,
best thing.
Garrett Cole, Max Fried, Carlos Rondon, Lewis Gill, and Clark Schmidt. In theory, that's the rotation.
Yep.
That's a veteran laden rotation. They have some arms down that they can maybe flop in there, but the real question to me is the lineup: Jason Dominguez, Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, Stanton, Chaz Chisholm, Goldschmidt, Austin Wells, Volpe, and DJ LeMahieu.
Well, DJ LeMahieu is a question mark from birth, it seems.
Well, that's why it's called a projected.
Yeah, because he's great. He's so great when he's healthy, but my God, he's been a
He's
mess.
36.
2-3 years now. He's been a disaster.
Yeah. Well, that's because he's getting close to 40.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if Jason is the guy that everybody wants him to be.
Well,
Because
you don't know until you try.
So far, I think Anthony Volpe hasn't been who they wanted him to be, and I don't think very many of their younger people that they've counted on, like Oswaldo Cabrera, isn't either. So why would they believe that Jason's going to be any different? I mean,
look, who know? Again, you don't know. Like you just don't. That's the thing with the young players. Like again, as a Mets fan, I can tell you that I've heard of more phenomenal pitchers come through our system that wind up being phenomenal elsewhere. And
well, I live in Pittsburgh, so get used to it.
There you go. No, but no, it's never because of money though. To see the difference here is that
they go somewhere and they're like, "Hey, by the way, you should throw this pitch more," and then all of a sudden, Garrett Cole's Garrett Cole.
Well, yeah, but Garrett Cole was
never that.
But they were never going. But he was never that. But he was never going to make the money there either.
No.
Like Paul Skeens, like I said earlier, the clock is ticking. Like Paul Skeens is like the Yankees and the Mets and the Dodgers and the Red Sox and the Blue Jays and they're all the Giants. They're all going. The Giants are desperate for someone. So like they're all just going.
The Yankees can win the division.
I think they can. I don't think they will. I would pick if I was going to make a pick in the AL list. AL East, Christ, would be. I would go Orioles. I think they'll make the playoffs, though. I think that the Yankees will make a wild card spot. I can't imagine like so many things, in my opinion, would have to go wrong for them to miss out. I just think that now there's a certain aspect. Like if the Rays wind up being decent, then that's going to be a struggle because that's, out of 19 or however many games they play against the Rays, how many of those are they going to win? The Red Sox are not that weak this year. I don't really think they're their pitching staff. They got Walker Buehler, hoping that works out for them. Right. Lucas Giolito. Okay. He's good, but their lineup, I mean, their pitching staff is, Liam Hendricks in the bullpen. Aroldis Chapman. I mean, these are retreads if I've ever heard. Adam Ottavino. I'm a Mets fan. I know how much of a retread he is. But like if you look at their lineup, like Connor Wong or Carlos Narvaez is their catcher. Tristan Cassis, Alex Bregman. They picked up Bregman. That was huge. That made a difference. But like outside of that, and then of course they got Rafael Devers, who is not happy, by the way, in Boston.
No.
Dude is not happy.
He made it clear.
So Trevor Story, there's a retread if there's ever been one. So like if you're looking at the Red Sox, that's not the answer. Okay, so the Red Sox aren't going to challenge. But again, anything can happen. They may have a phenom rookie. They may have someone just emerge out of nowhere, and you just never know. That's the thing about baseball, and it's 162 games.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, we're trying our best to. I
Of course,
I don't think the Yankees. See, the thing is I think the AL Central is a big question mark.
Hold on. So we're still going. So like going through this, like with the Blue Jays,
I think they easily could at least push for a wild card. I mean,
the Blue Jays.
The Yankees.
Oh, definitely. I think they're all in the mix. I think the Blue Jays, the Orioles, and the Yankees.
The entire division, quite frankly.
I don't really have much faith in the Bo Sox, and I definitely don't have faith in the Rays right now.
I think the AL East is the strongest division, only because the NL West has the Rockies, and there is no team quite that bad in the AL East.
How about the NL East? Oh, the Nationals. They have the Nationals.
Yeah.
Nationals are awful.
So
the Mets beat the crap out of the Rays today, by the way, 10-1.
So in a division like this, you have to figure, okay, that's going to be a lot of competitive games in division, and then it's just a question of how strong some of the AL Central teams might be trying to follow up, a really tremendous season from both the Tigers and the Royals. Are they going to be able to recapture that magic? I could see why you would say they're at least making the playoffs. I think they have real potential to miss completely.
Sure. I mean, I think it's possible. I mean, how often do the Yankees really miss the playoffs? So it doesn't happen often.
It's likely, right? Like I think it's likely. I think some of the other teams, especially in the AL East, have a better chance of pushing them out of the picture. So, the Yankees, I think there's the pitching is definitely a plus, but there's a lot of questions on the lineup.
I agree, and I think when you're talking, I mean, the Orioles are still legit,
but of course, Oswaldo Cabrera or Volpe all of a sudden turn into the player that they thought they were going to be, and Jesus Dominguez is the next coming of Aaron Judge, then this lineup looks a lot different.
Of course. And that's why, I mean, ultimately that's why you play the games, right? But like, if you look at like the only team in the AL East that really, I mean, the Orioles and the Blue Jays are the two teams, because if you look at like the Blue Jays, like their rotation, for example, Kevin Gausman's great. Jose Barrios is good. Chris Bassett is one of the most underrated, most solid, dependable pitchers in baseball, in my opinion. And then they even have an aged Max Scherzer. So let's see what
looked kind of interesting in this.
If Max Scherzer returns to any kind of form, that changes the game.
If they even get 100 innings out of him,
right? And then if Alek Manoah can get his shit together, and
I don't know what happened to him.
I don't know what happened either.
Hold on. Okay, so we've given our thoughts on the Yankees. Let's talk about the Blue Jays since we brought them up.
Yeah, right. Sure. I think Alek Manoah is dealing with the Rick Ankiel situation.
We have Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero are on their final years of their contracts.
Bo Bichette's going to play like a monster this year too. I can see it.
That being said, they were in on Juan Soto, did not sign. They were in on Bregman, did not sign. They were in on a couple of big-time free agents. None of them signed to Toronto. So Toronto did whatever they could to try to back up their team. So let's, like you were mentioning it earlier, it's an interesting team because I think last year, right, from everything what I read, is Vlad Guerrero played out of his mind, but Bo Bichette didn't. Bo Bichette was terrible.
He had a bad
George Springer was basically a rotting corpse.
Yes.
Dalton with Dalton, their left fielder, suffered an injury and probably not going to be available till later in the season this year.
But they picked up
So
Anthony Santander.
yeah, and he's a really good player.
And you have
I
Dalton
think that's
Varsho also.
I think yeah, that's who I was talking about. Dalton
Oh, I'm
Varsho.
sorry.
Yeah. Santander, he is gonna probably be good for 30 to 28 home runs,
Mhm.
couple hundred RBIs,
He was comparable to Alonso. The Mets were
and
looking at him if they
if
didn't
he
re-sign
gets
Alonso.
anywhere close to a 800 OPS, he's gonna be at least a protective bat for Vlad.
Sure.
But the question, of course, always health and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
their lineup as of right now, like projected: George Springer, Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero, Santander, Kirk, Will Wagner, Varsho, Jimenez, Clement. But I don't believe Darton's gonna start the season. The question for them is not the lineup. I know like there's a couple players from what I heard that just did not play well last year from their lineup, and some people their theory was that was a large reason why the team didn't compete. But in my opinion, I think that's a misread. I think their pitching was a big issue.
Yes,
I
very
mean,
much so.
let's talk about it. Alex Manoah, who won a Cy Young, is now barely rosterable.
I haven't seen him in
How?
spring yet,
Why?
but yeah, who knows? Like I said, I think he has a Rick Ankiel situation. All of a sudden, he went from being amazing to like he can't hit the glove for the life
He
of him.
was a phenomenal pitcher for
He
like
was
3 seasons.
so much so that I
Leading
traded
up
for him
to
in a video game.
leading up to his Cy Young win, and then it seemed like as soon as he won the Cy Young, everything like fell apart, and he's never been the same pitcher since.
Well, he's not the
And,
healthiest person, so let's just say that in terms of like
but like
size and all that.
I guess my question
He's
is:
pushing 3 bills. I
Is there
mean, he's a big
something?
dude.
Is there something inherent with the Blue Jays where their pitchers just have this issue? Because Gossman was pitched really well last year,
Mhm.
but in the past he's been kind of inconsistent. A lot of their other pitchers, I over the last 5 years, because I organize my factory sets. I get pretty familiar with like what the rotation is for each year.
This is wild.
There's always some player that like was really good one season and then like 2 seasons later is no longer in the rotation with the Blue Jays. Is there something with their coaching, something with their training staff?
Hard to say. Hard to say, but you want to talk about consistency. We were talking about Kevin Gossman.
Yeah.
So we talk about inconsistency, but like yet last year's regular season, he was 14-11 with a 3.83 ERA, right? His career stats is that he's 102 and 102 with a 3.83 ERA. Like that is the model of consistency. Like you can't be more consistent than that. The guy's got a sub-4 career ERA. I don't question, some pitchers are just like that. I remember in the 80s, Brett Saberhagen won a Cy Young in like 1985 and then was awful in 1986. And then he won the Cy Young in 1987. And then he was awful in 1989. And then he was great again. I think he got traded to the Mets in 89 or 90, and he was great for that. So some pitchers are just like that. It's weird. I have no explanation for it, and I don't think he did either. But yeah, so Kevin Gossman's fine as a frontline guy. I don't know if I would choose him as my ace, but he's not, But who's their ace? Is Berrios their ace? No. I mean, I know it was Manoah.
But he used to be.
Right.
And Manoah used to be. See, that's the thing. It's like Gossman normally in most teams would probably be a third starter if you're really trying to win, right? I don't even think he'd be above 4 in some rotations. Like as bad as the Marlins are, I don't think he even makes the starting rotation.
Who, Berrios?
No, Gossman.
Oh, Gossman. Okay.
Some of their arms in the Miami, they're either younger, you want to give them more of a chance, or they're just better.
I mean, Gossman, again, if we go by last year, Gossman was over. He won 14 games and had a sub-4 ERA. That's great as a starter, especially in the American League East. Yeah, that's a great.
Wins don't matter anymore, but
No, they don't. But like again, I go by.
It's tough for me. It's tough for me as like as a lifelong baseball fan. Like with like some of the modern baseball stuff, drives me crazy.
I mean,
I'll always associate like home runs, RBIs as
but I
kind
mean,
of like the
but
driver
again,
for me.
again, like if you want to, if you wanted to like do an analysis of that, like I look at even in the '90s, like so who was. I don't know if this is a true stat, but I know it was definitely close. He's definitely in the top 5. Andy Pettit was in definitely the top 5 in wins
Yeah,
in the '90s for
yeah,
sure. The guy
yeah.
won 20 games every year like clockwork.
So was Mike Messina. Yeah,
Well, but Mike Messina was a much
Glavine,
better pitcher, in my opinion.
Greg
Much better.
Maddux.
Greg
Yeah,
Maddux was an all-timer. But what I'm getting at is that Andy Pettit, in my eyes, I wouldn't even put him in the Hall of Fame, let alone mark him as a top-tier ace pitcher. And yet for the Yankees, he was like the ace. He was
he was
always the
the
front
ace.
line. He was always the frontline starter. Musina, Clemens, it didn't matter. He was always there. So like
Yeah,
it's
they did. They always did. Like now that you're bringing it up, I remember being a kid, be like, why isn't Roger Clemens and like Mike Messina like at the front of the rotation?
right.
It's always Andy Pettit was,
It's
and
always
even
Andy
like in the
Pettit.
playoffs, Andy Pettit was always the
Game
one to
one.
start the game one.
Every time. Yeah, every time. And maybe it's a consistency thing. It's what we're talking about. Andy Pettit was consistent. You knew what you were going to get out of Andy Pettit every time, no matter what.
Yeah.
He never got shelled, but
Would
he never would lock you down for
where would
9
you
straight
put the
innings.
chances of the Blue Jays pushing for the playoffs?
I put it pretty high. Based on the fact that
What you're saying essentially, right, is if we're gonna say the Blue Jays are at least in the race, right? Which I mean, most teams are in the race now with the current playoff format, right?
mhm,
Then we're saying that a lot of the teams in the West are probably worse, and we're
yes.
definitely saying that
Although
there's
there's way more
there
question marks in the West.
there are teams in the Central that are not going to repeat. Somebody is going to fall out of the picture.
Well, so if I'm doing an overview of the American League, right?
Yeah,
The AL East is the most bettable division. Let's put it that way. I can pretty much put money down on the Yankees, Orioles, and Blue Jays to make the playoffs, and at least 2 of those 3 teams are going to make the playoffs. I can almost guarantee that. I'd be shocked if 2 of those 3 teams don't make the playoffs. I would be very, very surprised. In the AL Central, the Tigers just burst onto the scene out of nowhere. The White Sox are god awful. The Royals somehow like stayed alive for a bit, right? And then you have the model of consistency, the Guardians. Like they're always there. And the Twins, who collapsed in such a massive way last year. But there's so many question marks there. The West is the same. So many question marks. The Rangers, what could the Rangers be if Jacob DeGrom is healthy and returns to form?
a completely different team.
Completely different team. What can the Astros be now that
I
now Bregman's gone and
we'll,
like
we'll get there, but I don't think they'll ever be the same
what
team again.
or
I
what
think they're
about
done. I,
like the Mariners? Like the Mariners kind of showed up, blip on the screen for a minute, and then fell off again. So
that's
what can they be, right? So
yeah.
and the Angels are just dead in the water. So what the AL West question marks, AL Central question marks, AL East, you got 3 top tier teams. Like, and the only real question mark out of them, in my opinion, because
Great.
no, not the Rays. I discount. I say the Rays and the Red Sox are done from the word go. Now,
Oh,
I think the Red Sox can make some noise, and I think if the Rays stay healthy, but again, these are question marks. I can look at the Yankees coming off a World Series appearance, really only losing one piece. Really, is all that happened. They lost one
really,
piece,
really big piece.
but they added a lot of pitching and they added a lot of good pitching. And then they added other pieces that, again, like you said, in the aggregate, if I take all of Goldschmidt's numbers and all of Cody Bellinger's numbers and throw them together, they might come close to Juan Soto. They're obviously not Juan Soto, but they're within reason, right? And if Judge stays healthy, which is a big if always with him, but if he stays healthy, he's a dominant force. You can't mess with Judge. So I can count on the Yankees. And then on top of that, the Yankees also have an advantage over many teams, which is come July, they can make moves. They can always make moves. They always have a farm system. They always have money. Never a problem there. And then the Orioles, unless they fall off a cliff, I can book them for the playoffs right now. So
Okay. Well, let's talk about the Orioles. They lost Corbin Burns.
Mhm.
They lost Santander. They didn't really replace Corbin. They brought in, I think it's Tyler O'Neill
Hold on a second. I am
to
called up.
replace Santander. Let's see if I remembered that correctly.
We got Zach-
Yeah,
We got Zach Eflin.
Tyler O'Neill. Look at that. Look at that.
Good, nice job. Good
what
job.
what
Way
we
to go.
have learned here, folks, is Rob Barnhart can crunch and burn some information into his head. Where was that in high school?
That's right. I did
in high school. I could not do that in high school.
I did recite the entire last play of the 1996.
I had to try
World
so
Series
hard
for
just
you,
to get C's. But the Orioles, I think are an interesting case, right? Young team. They lost their big time ace. They lost a crucial piece in Santander. They also traded away a couple of other players. Stowers went to the Marlins. A couple other moves that people in the major media probably really aren't too familiar with.
Right
now, as a Pirate fan, right? Baltimore's not that far away. When I went to Virginia Beach, which is only a couple hour drive for me, everything was either Nationals or Orioles. It kind of like depending on where you were, but it was more of a Nationals kind of area. But the point is that like it's kind of weird, but like they're kind of right there. Like they're a pretty easy team to follow for people who live in Pennsylvania. I tended to watch the Nationals more because I was more interested to see like a young team to see if they could pull it all together. But I did watch some of the Orioles and Gunnar Henderson, phenomenal player. A lot of their youth have hit big time compared to like the Yankees. The problem that I see is that going into this season is the youth is carrying all the weight like this season. Like in the past, we've seen young teams like this where like they go out and they add like a couple really seasoned like pieces. But this year going into the Orioles, like they've lost some of those pieces and they haven't really replaced them. I mean, I guess they're kind of hoping Tyler O'Neill could be some approximation of Santander. I think that's at one point in time, maybe I could see that, but last couple seasons, Tyler hasn't been anywhere near the player he was the first couple years he was with the Cardinals.
Right.
To expect him to replace the numbers that Santander put up is dubious.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a shot in the dark. Without, I mean, it's it's not a complete shot in the dark. It's a little, it's a shot at dusk. It's a little dark, but it's not. I totally forgot that that Burns walked and left. That doesn't change my prediction. It just changes the confidence that I have in that prediction. I still think the Orioles will win the division, but
I don't know
how they do in the playoffs will be different.
Their rotation as of right now is Zach Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez, Charlie Morton, Dean Kramer, and I'm not even going to pronounce the last guy. It's a Japanese name. I'm not even going to attempt.
Tomoyuki Sugano.
There you go.
Tomoyuki Sugano. Yes.
I mean, safe to say,
old.
if Corbin Burns was in that rotation, you'd feel a lot better about it.
Absolutely.
I mean,
well, Charlie Morton's
essentially trading Corbin Burns for I think he's like 40. Is he 41?
Who?
Charlie Morton.
Oh yeah, he's ancient.
He's like,
let's put it this way. He's only 7 years younger than me, which puts him about at your age.
Corbin Burns is 31 this season, replacing a guy who's coming off one of his best seasons, except for maybe a few years with the Brewers, with Charlie Morton, who is okay. He's more of an innings eater at this point.
Yeah,
that's kind of a downgrade.
I agree.
Zach Eflin.
Zach Eflin's awful.
I don't know, man. people, every time you rely on somebody coming from the Rays that was okay or like good, every time they go somewhere, they never ever can repeat who they used to be for whatever reason. Uh, Without maybe Blake Snell, you can argue is one of the few
I mean,
exceptions, but
it's not always that way, but yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, relying on that, and also relying on a pitcher like, like Eflin's been around. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I mean, he's only 30. That's not too bad.
I'm just saying,
But
like,
he's never had a stellar season. Like he's never been great.
that's
Last year he was 18-8 with a 3.50 ERA though. That's comparable to Gosman, which is fine.
for all that the youth movement in Orioles, and the same thing with the Nationals. It's kind of similar. They have their scouting is pretty good on positional players, but pitching not so much. Like there isn't like a
But that might be
Gunnar
what they were going for, honestly.
Gunnar Henderson, or there isn't like a prospect, a Paul Skeens in their system.
Right.
I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of hope. There's been a lot of possibilities. I mean, as a guy who buys Bowman every year, um, you see the prospects, like, because they'll release like the player, they'll release like 50 cards from like Major League Baseball players, but the real prize is like there's a one through like usually about 500 cards, and they're all prospects. They're all like either people that have played a little bit of Major League Baseball or going to definitively,
Right.
possibly. And sometimes those players never see Major League Baseball, but some of them do. And I remember like I bought the last 4 years of Bowman. The Orioles pitchers, you can flip over the card, and they'll always be saying like, "Well, this guy is, number 30 in the top 100 prospects list," and then I've yet to see him make a
Right.
Major League Baseball start.
Right.
So I think that's the one thing that I worry about with the Orioles, like winning the division, is in a division where the Yankees at least did something. That I mean, I don't they didn't they lost a big piece, and I'm not so sure about like their replacement pieces for that. Um, but we could definitively say the Yankees rotation day one is infinitely better than the Orioles.
I would agree with that. I just think what I think is, and it goes back to what you were saying about the Yankees and their age, and like,
Yeah,
there's
that's the
just
thing.
question marks up and
The
down.
Orioles
Whereas
have the youth, right?
Orioles have the youth, and that's why I think they could win the division, but I think they'll still struggle in the playoffs. I don't think they made the right moves to win the World Series or to get there. I think they made the right moves to get into the playoffs and probably win the division because they can win the marathon thing. But at the end of it all, they're like, I just looked up I forgot what happened to them last year because they barely played. Like they scored 1 run in 2 games. Like they were a mess. They lost
Yeah.
the series 3-1, like in terms of score.
Oh, it was
not in terms of games.
They
That's
just didn't
wild.
show up.
They just didn't hit at all.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy to me. Because I was trying to remember. I'm like, well, maybe pitching wasn't maybe pitching was the problem.
No, it was the batting, at least in the playoffs.
It was the bats. So I mean, yeah, but I think
That's the thing though. When you're counting on young players, younger players tend to be a little bit more
timid.
And then they hit their prime, and there's like a good 5 or 6 years where the player is you can pretty much take to the bank if they're really good. Like you can take to the bank what you're going to get roughly. You might get a little bit more or a little bit less, but like roughly it's going to be in the same ballpark. The Orioles are still in that early process where a lot of the players are not really in the center of that prime. They're kind of still in that. Are they who we think they are? Like you would still say Gunnar Henderson is still as good as he is. I don't think people would say he is, consistent, and that we could guarantee, take money to the bank, he's going to be the best player on the Orioles team. I don't think you could say that. And
no, I mean, because you got
Jackson
Cedric
Holiday
Mullins,
was terrible last year.
You got Cedric Mullins, you got Adley Rushman, you got there's a lot of great players.
I mean, Jackson got sent back down. That theoretically he's going to be their opening day shortstop. it will this year be different for Jackson Holiday because they kind of need him. They need him to be the guy that everybody's hoping him to be. Because if he is anywhere close to Gunnar Henderson level, then this team doesn't miss Santander at all. If anything, Tyler O'Neill comes close enough to those numbers that greatly improve Holiday and a couple other players, some of their younger players becoming like vastly different players. You would not only replace Santander, but you'd go above and beyond like what the team did last year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so not to change gears or anything, because I just decided to move on, like to look at the next thing. You had said that the Rays will just be good again just because they somehow find a way. They're going to have to find a way, because I'm literally looking at their roster right now. Outside of Shane McClanahan, like,
who's coming back from injury,
what the hell do they have on this team? Well, like, Arozarena's gone. I didn't even know that Arozarena went to the Mariners. Like,
I think we both agree though the Orioles are making the playoffs.
I think the Orioles and the Yankees are making the playoffs.
The question is can the Orioles win the division?
I think the Yankees and the Orioles and the Blue Jays will do a round robin, beat the crud out of each other for 162 games, and whoever's the healthiest will win the division at the end of the year. That's kind of how it's going to go. I really think that's how it's going to go.
But like, since you brought it up, the Rays is an interesting team, right?
Are they?
Because as usual, they lost a few pieces and they basically didn't replace them. They've done a lot of interesting trades. They traded for Christian Morel. And everybody's kind of like, Isaac Paredes was pretty good for you. Like, what are you doing?
Andy
But
Diaz,
it's the Rays, so everybody's
Wow.
kind of kind of takes it for granted that it's going to work out. But I think the bigger story for the Rays right this year, in their hopes of playoffs, is I think their run's over.
Yeah, I think Shane McClanahan has to pitch.
Here's the main reason why, at least this year, they're definitely not going to make the playoffs.
He's going to have to pitch one game in every series.
The Rays aren't playing at home. They don't have a stadium.
They're playing totally forgot
essentially
about that.
in a spring training facility that the Yankees are letting them borrow.
Right.
They're having to spend a lot of money to even get that up to major league level. And all year long, though, you're going to be playing in a stadium that's entirely different. You don't know how it plays until you get there.
And they're going to rebuild in St. Pete. Why? Why are they doing that?
I don't.
Have you ever been there?
I mean, I know this is messed up, but I was kind of really hoping they were one of the few teams to relocate.
I mean, if they can be successful,
I know it's not a popular position, but like, I mean,
they can be successful in Tampa. They just need to be in the city. They need to not, like, I don't know if you've ever been there, but getting to St. Petersburg is a nightmare. Like, it's the worst. I've been to that. First off, the Trop, good riddance, honestly. Like,
far south as I've gone is Savannah.
Yeah, it's terrible that happened. It was sad to watch, and it's sad to say. The Trop is literally a gymnasium. It's echoey. It's all. I've been to many games there. It's awful. It's the worst stadium I've ever been to, bar none, without question. The only cool thing about it was the big neon Tropicana sign.
So you kind of know it. You're used to it, right? And now you're not playing in it, right? You're not used to the dimensions.
To go back to your relocation thing,
you're playing in a totally different stadium.
They can be successful in Tampa, and I think they're going to find that, because what's going to wind up happening is that because the stadium that the Yankees are letting them use is in Tampa, correct?
It's closer,
right?
For what I hear, it's closer.
It's not in St. Pete, though, right? I don't think.
I don't know how. I just know from like listening to a couple of baseball things that theoretically it's closer to Tampa,
because they need to be in the city. That's just the bottom line. Like, so regardless, without getting into that whole thing, like, of course, like, I would love to see a baseball team in like Nashville. I think that would be great. Or Portland. I think Portland would be dope. Someplace like that, someplace weird that's never been in Major League Baseball.
It's a race, so it'd have to be somewhere along the East Coast. probably either
Nashville would work.
Carolina,
It's probably
Virginia, Nashville, somewhere,
Nashville could work. Charleston would be interesting, like Carolina. That
yeah,
would be interesting.
Charlotte, somewhere like
Charlotte,
that.
sure. Yeah, that's what I meant. Charlotte, not Charleston. Sorry.
Charleston, hey, technically
Charleston's not bad, though.
it's in North Carolina.
No, I know, but it's not a bad city. But Charlotte's the bigger city. That's what I was thinking of. Where are they going to play? Oh, they're going to play at the Steinbrenner Field. Where is that? Let me see here. Yeah, it's in Tampa. It's in Tampa proper. So I bet, and I don't know how many people does this hold. So it holds 11,000. Okay, 11,000. We're going to do a little exploration here.
But the thing for me, like while you're looking that up,
yes,
like that I've heard a lot of people talking about the Rays is what we were talking about earlier. And I don't want to tip my hand. So there seems to be like the just overwhelming assumption they're just going to be competitive because they always are. And I'm just like, okay, that's true until it's not. Like, let's look at the A's, right? Okay. A's are the closest approximation of the Rays you can get. Mm-hmm. There are seasons where the Athletics have been competitive since the 80s. And it's about a 5, 6, 7 year window each time. And to be honest, for the Athletics, that window got shorter and shorter and shorter. But still, I mean, it's a couple seasons. We're now going into like close to 7, 8 seasons where the Rays were kind of like always competitive. A few times
they weren't that bad last year either. There were only 80 and 82.
Mostly won the wild card most of those years. When is it that things like the Red Sox, Toronto, Yankees, Orioles, it just gets to be too much?
I agree. No, I totally agree. I think at a certain point, look, I mean, we can get
at one point in time. The Orioles used to be the team that would spend money on aged veterans, and they were just sinking money, and the Yankees and the Red Sox were buying players at their height of their prime, and
they had strong cores.
And they had strong cores,
homegrown
right?
Cores, yep.
And the Rays could compete with that. But now you have an Orioles team that's relatively young. If they really want to, they can go out and add like I don't know why they didn't do this. Why they didn't make that trade for Kyle Tucker?
Because owners are greedy. That's ultimately they don't see the forest.
The Orioles had Kyle Tucker. That team's entirely different.
Absolutely, I agree.
But like,
totally.
All it takes is a couple pieces like that, and they're like really, really like heavy favorites. And the Rays can't do any of that. They can't even like. All they have to do is basically tear everything down and hope that they find a Blake Snell,
that they draft
a couple other pitchers, and a couple of positional players, and boom, we're right back. But I mean, we see like over time that gets harder and harder to do, right? Billy Beane was credited for almost 20 years of rebuilding that team over and over and over again. But each time he did so, it was always different, right? The early teams with like McGuire, Canseco were by far the most winningest teams out of the bunch, and they were the earliest. And then you had like the early 2000s Barry Zito era Athletics that were really, really good.
Sure.
But they never won anything.
Nope.
And then you had the 1 year where all of a sudden they do money baseball and they're super competitive, but they still lost.
They lost to the Yankees every year.
And then that whole team was
that year
torn
was the
down.
They lost to the Twins.
And then rebuilt. And then now we're back to the last couple of years. They've been tearing down, and they're slowly building the same pieces that they always do, right? They have a young core. They have merging possibilities. But as of right now, they don't have certain pieces that are there, right?
Look,
and the Rays are still kind of like that, right? Like every year they lose big pieces. They do their best to replace them, and somehow they end up in the playoffs.
I mean, if you want to talk about a model of consistency, ever since they changed their name from the Devil Rays in 2007 to the Rays in 2008, they've only like won less than 80 games twice.
Yeah, I mean, but like
twice. That's wild.
In this division,
that's crazy.
with a bunch of other teams doing similar concepts, right? Like, so at one point in time, you have to keep in mind, there was a point in time where the Rays were pretty much the only team doing this, right? They were doing the Athletics created Moneyball, but then the Rays took that thing and made it their own thing, and they had like this almost wizardry, but that was 10 years ago. Most of the teams now have the same access to the information, if not better. Like Red Sox have a lot more money to sink into stuff like that. There's a lot of teams that have money like that, and you have a lot of teams right now that are doing the same thing that they try to do, which is let people who they can't afford go, and hope that your farm system develops talent to replace them. You have the Orioles that did it. The Nationals are trying to do it. You have the Tigers who are in the midst of doing it. The Royals are having a resurgence doing it. And so, like, when there's that many teams trying to do exactly what you do, and now you're going to go ahead and you're going to compete with two teams that spend annually, if not $300 million, sometimes it's $400 million now, and you're gonna expect that you're just gonna, without fail, you're always gonna go to the playoffs. I mean, at some point in time, it gets to be too much.
You're not the Yankees. The Yankees are the only team that consistently, and the Braves, honestly.
And let's be honest. I mean, there was like, since they've come into the league, there's a few seasons where they were terrible, and
the first part of their
Longoria and those guys came, and then all of a sudden they started competing.
No, it wasn't until it's what I'm saying. It wasn't until they changed their name in 2008. The first time they made the playoffs, they were the Tampa Bay Rays in 2008. The year before, so in 2008 they won 97 games. In 2007 they won 68 games. Before 2008, they only won 70 games once. They were god awful for the whole portion of the beginning of their whole thing here, right? Yeah. So, and then they got to the World Series that year. They were and they've only missed the playoffs 8 times since 2008. And the only team that's done better is the Yankees in the AL East. The Red Sox since 2008, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They've missed the playoffs 10 times. The Blue Jays have only made it 5 times since 2008. And I haven't checked the Orioles yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that too.
Yeah. But like, I get it. Like, I mean, they've kind of established a certain trust in developing talent and somehow finding a way. But
yeah, I'm right.
I think the days of taking that for granted and just assuming that's going to be the case, I think it's gone. I just don't see the much merit in it. And to expect a team who haven't added any major pieces to speak of to compete with some of the bigger teams in a stadium that they haven't played in before, I think that's a lot to ask.
Sure. I mean, it's been a while since they've had this type of disruption. The 2008 season, speaking of that, they played like half the season in Orlando. So like they've had this issue before. This is nothing new. Hurricanes have definitely done their damage. But back to my initial point, like way back, why I started looking up attendance records in the first place is that they only average roughly 14 to 16,000 at Tropicana in their whole entire existence. The best number that they got is 23,000. That stadium holds 41,000 people.
Yeah. So 11,000, they're probably going to be close to a sellout.
And they're probably going to pack that place, and that might actually help them. And then furthermore into that, hopefully it convinces them not Tampa, to build in St. Pete. Yeah, it's in Tampa. So I think they'll do better. Like the year they went to the
you were talking about earlier, like things that we can't predict that could spark a team.
I mean, I don't
think that could be something that maybe, if you want to make an argument for the Rays again pushing somehow to the playoffs, that would be it. That being in Tampa, not being at the Trop, because there's a lot of headaches about the Trop. It could be a breath of fresh air, and they could because of everything that happened down there with the hurricane, the locals just, you know what, this year we're just going to try to really pack this place and express ourselves like that way, and it just catches fire, like kind of like the Mets did last year. I mean, with the whole Grimace thing. I mean,
Right, but
it's stupid, but like it sometimes little things like that spark, and then somehow this player plays above what he was supposed to, and this player plays above what he was supposed to, and next thing you know, you have like 3 or 4 guys playing their career years, and then all of a sudden that team that was supposed to be garbage is now winning 90 games.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's infinitely possible because I think every year, if you look at it, a better example than the Mets would be the Tigers of last year, because the Tigers had a core of young players that arrived.
They literally sold at the trade deadline. They were done.
Right. And they just had a bunch of young players and some veterans to support them.
And they went
to kind of make the playoffs, right? And of course, the Twins collapsed, and that was the major part of it. But
they play for a planet. You can't take that away from them.
Exactly, you can't. And so that's the point. That's so usually though, you can look at a team and say, well, there's talent there. Like you talk about those A's teams, they had Jason Giambi, they had Johnny Damon, they
Eric
had
Chavez.
Yeah, they had Eric Chavez.
Such a good player for so long.
They had Miguel Tejada. They had Barry Zito. They had Mark Mulder. They had Jason Isringhausen. Like they had stacked ass teams. I think the difference now compared to then, and
can't say that about the Rays.
But that's why I think if you look at baseball, and I'm not going to get political, I promise, but it does reflect the world that we live in because it's the only sport that does not put a communist system in, which is to cap how much you can spend, right? You can say, this is how much you can spend. This is how little you can spend, work within that. That's why the NFL has different teams. Like the NFL, half the teams in the NFL almost every year don't make the playoffs from year to year. Almost every year. It turns over just like that.
Yeah.
Major League Baseball needs to do this.
Football podcast. What I would do to make my year beginning predictions is I started to recognize a pattern. There was usually about 7 to 8 teams that always made it back to the playoffs, but then it was a mission to find out which teams were going to fade and which teams were going to go to the playoffs that given year. And I was pretty good with that system of predicting like what was going to happen. I'd read as much information as I could, and then given that just idea, okay, this many teams are probably going to repeat, and then it's just a matter of finding the rest of the playoff picture and determining like the probability of like what's going to be the Super Bowl, right? And I was remarkably consistent on like my divisions and wild cards and stuff like that. Now, who was going to win? Not so much, but like on the playoff picture, I got pretty good at it. And it's because what you're saying is like you could kind of see like the tides, like this team, is on its way up. It's probably gonna, and this team's kind of on its way down. Baseball, it's not like that. Like typically speaking, right? Like baseball teams tend to have longer windows of competitiveness, right? Like so, the Astros in the 90s were like one of the greatest teams in the world, and then like eventually they were no longer the greatest team in the world, and they decided, you know what, we're going to tear it all down and we're going to do it. And they were the really one of the early teams of tear it all the way down.
They were awful.
And let's just lose for like 5 years and let's try to rebuild this. And then slowly but surely they became
the old Enron Field days.
They became that team again much later after the players developed, right? And now they've had this big window, and in my opinion, they're on their way down again, right? Yep. But baseball, that window's much wider. Football, you might have 2-3 seasons where like you're really kind of like there. You have a chance to win the Super Bowl, maybe 4, maybe 5, and then boom, you could be at the bottom of the division.
Well, that's mostly because baseball players, you can pretty much count on a star baseball player playing a high level until they're like 36, 37 years old. In the NFL, that's not the case.
30.
Yeah, barely.
Average
barely.
is about 30.
Unless you're a quarterback. Quarterbacks are the only ones that seem to
Yeah,
last longer.
I'm saying
But
aggregate, like
yeah, everybody else. So like baseball players, like, like I was just about to
for a
say,
running back, it's like 5 seasons.
right, exactly. And that's why I'm saying, like, that's why with the Astros right now, what we're coming to the end of is the Altuve era. That's exactly what's ending. He's 34 years old. He's got what, 2, 3, maybe 4 more prime years left, especially with the way he
I
plays.
think he's already outside his prime, in my opinion.
Um,
I mean,
what do you mean? I mean,
they're
he
literally
two.
trying
I
to
mean,
move him to the outfield because he can no longer play second base.
right, but he hit 295 and hit 20 home runs last year, had 65 RBIs. You can't, I mean, his OPS was almost 800. I mean, he was,
When your defensive metrics become so bad that they have to move you,
but that
that's a
becomes a problem.
sign. That's a sign
Absolutely.
that the end's coming, right? Like
And granted,
the
you go
bat
like
is the last thing to go, right?
2023, he hit 311, I mean, his power numbers have never been huge, so that's fine. And his RBI numbers have never been huge except for a few
I
seasons.
think the Rays are
But
probably going to miss the playoffs this year. Unless
I,
some
you
crazy
think?
thing happens, and like
I would put my house on it.
yeah.
If the Rays make the playoffs, dude, if the Rays make the playoffs, I will rock a Rays jersey for like a solid month. I'm not joking. I'll make that prediction right now, even if I'm never on this podcast again. I will rock a Rays jersey.
Let's talk about the Red Sox and then we'll leave it there.
Yeah, AL East sounds good.
This seems to be the team that we disagree on. I'm high on this team.
right.
It certainly seems that the team has decided after the last 2 or 3 years where they've kind of just run a team out there but not really competing. They definitely went above and beyond to compete this year. I mean, they traded for Garrett Crochet. They brought in Walker Buehler. They signed Alex Bregman. They made big swings. I think their rotation has a chance to be every bit as good as the Yankees.
So
and it's younger.
Who's their ace?
And it's younger.
Who's their ace?
I don't know who they have.
Exactly.
Spotted.
I mean, Walker Buehler could certainly be an ace. We've seen it, but he's been injured like a long time now. I feel like he's been out a long ass time. Yeah, he only pitched 7 games last year. He was a mess. He was a 5.38 ERA. Walker Buehler. But Buehler's been an ace.
In theory, Garrett Crochet
just hasn't been since 2021.
Right now is, in theory, their ace.
Yeah. So looking at with
a guy
Garrett
who just
Crochet,
came from a team that lost almost record
a
number
million games. Yeah. No, they broke the record. So, I mean, look, as far as numbers go, their best pitcher looks like it's Tanner Houck. How do you say that name? I don't even know. He's 9-10 with a 3.12 ERA.
It's
Houck. There you go. I was trying to say that. He started 30 games. He had a 3.12 ERA, almost 200 innings, 1.14 WHIP. That's not bad. Like, that's solid. That is really solid. Lucas Giolito, what is he?
He was garbage last year, but he used to be good.
Let me see.
But that was
so we're looking for a bounce back from him. But even then, like, he hasn't had an ERA under 4 since 2021.
Yeah.
He was almost at 5 the past 2 seasons in a row. I said Walker Buehler already. Garrett Crochet, that's the guy I haven't looked up yet. I mean, he was 8-12, 3.58. That's respectable. 1.07 WHIP. So he must have given up some home runs or some shit. He started 32 games, only 146 innings in those 32 games, but that's not terrible.
The question,
I mean, he's only had one good season.
Make a big difference for the Red Sox is Brayan Bello.
Brayan Bello, okay.
Yeah, he's kind of been a burgeoning prospect for several years. He was like their number one prospect for years, and then he kind of came up, and so far he hasn't really consistently been.
But he wins. He was 14-8 last year, and he had a high ERA. 4.49 is, I mean, it's not the worst. It's high, but in his
but
1.3. I mean, that's
Red Sox wanted him to be. From everything I heard, think Pedro Martinez. Okay, that's what they were hoping he
Wow, you want to talk about aiming high? Holy hell!
I mean, I'm just being real with you. I mean, like, that was the expectation of this guy, is that he was going to be the next
poor guy,
dominant.
I feel terrible.
Like, number one, several Cy Young kind of guy, and so far, not that.
Yeah. No, who
But
seriously?
if he figures it out, all of a sudden he
Sure.
has the potential to be their ace.
Sure. I agree with you. I think with a combination, look, and their bullpen could be good. Like Liam Hendricks, all joking aside, like Liam Hendricks is fine in the bullpen. He didn't pitch much last. I think he was injured all year last year, right? Yeah, he was out
I
all year.
believe I know he at least was hurt.
Yeah,
I
he
don't
didn't
know
pitch at
how
all
much he
last year.
pitched or what. Okay.
Yeah, so he hasn't been good since 2022, and I think he got hurt in 2023. So he hasn't really pitched since 2023. That's a big question mark, but he can be great. Like he was a great closer. It was
Like
very
in
good.
theory, right? Like let's say
Aroldis Chapman, same deal. Same deal
yeah.
with Aroldis Chapman. I mean, he's 37, but the guy still hits
Actually, he was
100 on
pretty
the gun.
good for the Pirates last year.
Yeah, and he still hits 100 on the gun. So I
Not
mean, you
gonna lie,
can't.
like he was
Yeah, he had
very consistent.
5-5,
One of the few
3.7.
pitchers in our bullpen that you could go, all right, like there's not gonna be a tire fire. Like that was the thing with the Pirates. Like all last season is the pitching would do good, the offense would score just enough runs, and then the bullpen would come in and blow the game like
Yeah.
over and over and over. And I said it like before the season started. Everybody's like, "You think the Pirates are going to go to the playoffs?" Yeah, because I live in Pittsburgh, so and I'm like, "No, their bullpen's not good enough to get them
Yeah,
there."
I could have seen it as possible though. They have a decent. Anyway, we'll talk about that another time. The
No,
Pirates
but I'm just saying
possibility.
that I saw it, and so, but Aroldis Chapman was one of the few exceptions in that. So, but the question is, he's now 38 years old.
Yeah,
Like,
he's
I
getting
mean,
there. Eventually,
mean,
that 100 is going to be 97, and then it's going to be 95, and then he's going to get cracked. What I'm looking at with the Red Sox here is like their lineup. So Connor
dude, their
Wong is
lineup's
solid. Connor Wong is solid at catcher. I'm assuming he's going to platoon with Carlos Narvaez, or maybe he'll play every day, but he'll trade off. Narvaez is I remember him as a Met. He was okay. First base, they have nobody. Just Tristan Cassis guy. He's got no numbers. I don't know
well,
what his story. He's young. He's hella young.
again, he was one of the pieces that once their window closed, they've been counting on to be the next guy. Like,
And then they went and picked up
and
Vaughn
he's
Grissom, also, who, let's face it,
from
was
the
good for the
Braves.
Braves. He was good for the Braves. He's
He
a very
was
solid player.
He was very good in his rookie year. Then the year after, not so much. Arcia ended up replacing him.
That's because
Which is
Arcia
why
was
they
better.
traded him.
But he still hit 280. I mean, he only played 23 games, but he hit 280. I can't argue with 280.
The problem with Vaughn Grissom is he's not that over more bats so far. But
Right.
he's still a relatively young player.
So you're
but the
solid
Braves gave up on him, which kind of
you're solid at
makes
second
you
base.
nervous.
The Red Sox are solid at second base with Alex Bregman. They're solid at third base with Rafael Devers. Like, you can't argue with any of that. At shortstop, you're looking at Trevor Story, who only had 94 at bats last year.
Yeah, I mean, he basically didn't play.
Right.
I
What
don't
was
think
his
he's
last
ever
full
going to be
season?
the player he was in Colorado.
2023. So 2023 was his
If
last
he can even
big.
get anywhere close, I think like this team is lineup is
Here's the problem.
frightening.
Here's the problem.
Let's put it this way: between Bregman, Devers, it's better lineup than Yankees. Just those two players.
No. Because your question marks, okay. All right, let's do this. So my question marks here, we're looking at Trevor Story, and let's put
I would say Goldschmidt is a good approximation. Two guys who used to be good that may not be good anymore.
Okay, cool. So let's do that. That's a good one. I like that. I was gonna go with someone else, because I thought Goldschmidt might have
Devers
been too big,
and Judge,
but
or equals.
Paul Goldschmidt last year had 22 home runs and 65 RBIs, dramatically down from 2 years ago when I think he won an MVP. Yes. When he won the MVP in 2022, he had 35 home runs, 115 RBIs, hit 317. Last year, he hit 245 with 22 home runs, 65 RBIs. His OPS was 716. So that's not horrendous.
I wouldn't be surprised that was a career low.
That is a career low, very much so. So yeah, he has fallen off. He is going to be 37 years old this year. So that's fair, sort of. I mean, how old is Story? Story is still 5 years younger than him. But the last good year Trevor Story had was, it's been a long time.
Might be 19.
2021, he had 24 home runs and 75 RBIs. He hit 251. I would take that as a good season. I would take that as a legit. You got 75 RBIs. That's legit. The year after that, 2022, he had 16 home runs with 66 RBIs in Boston, but he hit 238. So that's bad. But his OPS was 737, which isn't terrible. So it's not great, but it's not terrible.
His power numbers have never been the same since Colorado.
Of course not. Of course not. No one expects that. And look, Rafael Devers, comparing Rafael Devers to Aaron Judge is, first off, Aaron Judge is arguably, without Shohei Ohtani, the best player in baseball.
Disagree. He's too unhealthy. Same
Okay,
thing with
fair.
When he's healthy, sure, he's like one of the best players in the world.
But he's not unhealthy because of random
he's
injuries.
No Mike Trout. Okay, Mike Trout, before his age got to him, gave 10 seasons of phenomenal baseball.
Yeah, Mike Trout is almost as tragic as Jake DeGrom.
when you could count every year, he was going to give you awesome numbers. You've never been able to say that about Judge. He's always been, one year he'll be 30 home runs and then he's hurt. And then another year he'll hit like 40 home runs and then he'll be hurt. And then now we've had 2 back-to-back seasons where he's hit 50 plus. His chances of visiting the IL are high.
He's got over 300 home runs in his career already. Aaron Judge, that's wild.
I'm not saying he's terrible. I'm just saying.
So
I'm saying Rafael Devers is not nearly.
So Aaron Judge, since
the player, if you compare just the stats, but for Boston, and in that lineup, he plays like a similar role, and you add Bregman behind him, where Judge lost Soto. I think that's the difference, right? Like
so going
Yankees
back to
have Judge, but they don't really have the same player behind him. Whereas,
and that's what I'm going to get
Red
to in
Sox
a second.
Greatly increased the bat behind Devers in theory.
But just to clear one thing up, so Aaron Judge, 2 things. One, Aaron Judge, as far as I remember, anyway, has never suffered from an injury where it was like, what happened there? Like, why is he gone for so? Like, Giancarlo Stanton has like, oh my God, he has a random back injury. Oh my God, he's got a random biceps injury. Like,
no,
Aaron Judge hurt himself running into a fence. He hurt himself diving for a ball. Like, he plays too hard. I agree with that. It's a problem. But like, he's played 3 seasons in a row now where, I mean, 2023, he missed 60 games. But in 2021, he played 148 games. Sorry. In 2022, he played 157. Last year, he played 158. So he doesn't get those random ailments like other players. He gets those because of the way he's playing.
When he was younger.
Right. True. He might, but he's 32 last year and he played 158 games.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that given his injury history, right? Like,
and the only reason just to clarify, the only reason I'm going hard on this because you disagree with me that Aaron Judge is arguably the best player in baseball because he definitely is.
He's not.
He definitely is, without question.
Acuna is far better.
Who?
Acuna.
And you're going to talk about availability? What are you kidding me?
He is one of the most unhealthy people in the world. But when he's on the field, there is no player better. He's better defensively.
Interesting.
He's better on the bases.
Okay, here we go.
And his numbers are just as good as and his power numbers are less. But like when you factor in all the rest, he's a better player.
I don't do just power numbers. That is a myopic way of thinking. But he's consistent with his home runs. I mean, I'm not trying to shit on Acuna. Don't get me wrong. I love him. I hope his brother turns out to be as good, honestly, because I love Ronald Acuna, and as a Mets fan, Luis Angel Acuna is on our team.
I hope he's nothing like.
Yeah, I know you are. I know you do, but that's just a whole different story. But like, you want to talk about like availability being a talent.
I hope the Mets continue to run out McNeil's dead carcass for the whole season.
I mean, McNeil might go ahead and win another batting title. You just never know, especially with Juan Soto and Alonso. There's no pressure on him.
He hasn't been that player in 3 years.
Has it been 3 years since he won that title? I don't think so. I think it was 2023. He won the batting title.
Did he?
I feel like he did.
Maybe.
It wasn't that long ago. That's why last year was such a shock because we were like, why does he suck? Like, what happened? He got injured and then he came back and he sucked. It was awful.
35. That would be why.
Yeah, he is. He is kind of on the upside of the age thing. Well, he's 32, but where is it? Where is it?
But
Where is it?
what
Where is it? Where is it?
what is like your
Sorry,
real
2022. He hit 326 in 2022. And then the year after, he hit 270, which is not terrible. Way down, but not terrible.
Yeah, I figure it's at least a year, maybe or two earlier where he won the batting title.
And he got injured last year.
Because
He
I
was
would
injured,
remember
so-
if it was like that recent. Okay, so
but he needs to be better.
give me your
Agreed.
real reasons why, like, you think the Red Sox, no matter how much they poured into it, they're gonna miss the playoffs. I mean, that's. I mean,
think they're gonna miss the playoffs.
you said it earlier. You said you would be willing to put money on that they're not going to make the playoffs.
I would, yes. I do some
Why?
sports betting, and I
Like
would.
Bregman's such an upgrade. They're
So the reason
Bueller and Crochet are massive upgrades compared to the rotation last year.
it's less about how good I think the Red Sox. It's less about how good I think the Red Sox are going to be. I think they're on their way. I think they're a piece or two away. They could make a move in July and change my mind. But as of right now, if I'm looking at the rosters, I think the Blue Jays, the Yankees, and the O's are just better. I think they're just better teams. I think the O's maybe not because they don't have they don't really have a Rafael Devers or an Aaron Judge. They have a
Yeah,
few.
Gunner's threatening.
Yeah, but they have a few that are the next tier down, and I think that's where these other teams. I think that's where the Red Sox miss. They have two top tier players, Devers and Bregman. Great. I mean, Bregman's aged, but he's still good. He still had a
Only
great year last
32.
year. Yeah, I mean, but he's entering into the back end. Let's put it that way. And there's a reason why he was out there for so long. It's the same thing. Like a lot of these players are overvalued. I love Pete Alonso. I love him, but I think he's highly overvalued. I think he's way more valuable with the Mets than anywhere else. Because I think
disagree. I mean, you mean to tell me in a perfect world, right? Like
Mhm.
the Pirates billionaire owner decides to give him just a little bit more money for one season. You mean to
Mhm.
tell me that doesn't like make the Pirates vastly different team?
Sure, it does, but I don't think he's.
Because they have no. I'll tell you, they have nobody that hit over 20 home runs. So
right, but he doesn't
having
have
a guy,
but
who
he's
can
not a
hit,
$50 million a year guy. That's the thing.
no,
He's
like
not
a 30
that,
million.
and that's what he thought he was, and that's what Bregman thought he was too. Bregman thought he was a top tier guy, and they're just not. They're and like I think the Mets overpaid him, and deservedly so. He's homegrown. They made the NLCS because of him. Him and
But he did
Lindor.
lose money on that deal, though.
He didn't. Not. I mean, he lost
Compared to
long-term
the
money.
first offer he turned down. It was not commensurate.
Well, he
to
lost
that.
long-term money, but he didn't lose yearly average.
No,
He made more on the yearly average. I think the yearly average on the long-term deal would have been 27 and change, and I think this one's 30. It's 30. So, but anyway, the point that I'm making is that I think the O's are a collection of second-tier players, which plays well in other words, I think if the Red Sox made the playoffs, if they were good enough, like if Walker Bueller shows up and the Red Sox made the playoffs with Bregman and Devers in tow, I think they'd be frightening to play. However, I think over the long haul of a season, they're not going to get there. It's a lot like
you're
the
saying
Braves.
they lack depth. You're saying that
yes,
besides the few big pieces, the rest of the team is just too many questions.
It's like what you were talking about with the Braves of the 90s. The reason why they never won in the World Series is because the other team just had bigger players. They had better stars that showed up at the right time. Whereas the David Justices of the world didn't do it for the Braves at the time. They just weren't that team. They were frontline pitching, but not big bats. And the Yankees had the Yankees.
I mean, some of the pitching was exactly who they were. And Chipper Jones always arrived. And Andrew Jones was out of his mind in the playoffs a lot of the time.
Why didn't they win?
Because Glavine would randomly implode sometimes, or it'd be Smoltz. It was never Maddox's fault.
No, Maddox never.
It was always like weird things like that. Like,
do you know how much I hate the Braves? And I said that, but I actually own a Braves jersey because I love Greg Maddux that much. I love Greg Maddux. He owned the Mets. He ruined the Mets almost as badly as Chipper.
I think they're going to make the playoffs.
The Braves?
The Red Sox.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll put a pin in that. and let's talk again in 6 months and see what happens, because I don't agree, but I
If
think
they're in the running, right? In theory, let's say they're in the wild card hunt. In theory, Toronto's out of it. You mean to tell me they had Vlad Guerrero and that's not a World Series team?
you mean the Red Sox?
Yes.
I don't think they're a World Series team because I don't trust their pitching at all. I don't trust I don't even know who I'm not frightened of any of those pitchers going in. None of those pitchers. It's my problem with the Mets right now too.
That was
I'm not
I mean, you
outside
could
of
have said that last year about the Braves when they're saying, "Hey, we're going into the season with Spencer Strider and Chris Sale."
Okay,
I laughed at him. I laughed at him. I thought we were going to be terrible last
but
year.
Spencer Strider is a frontline ace.
He
That guy's an ace.
was, but when
He
your
still
second is a dead carcass named Chris Sale, you're like, what are we doing?
Who won a Cy Young? So there you go.
Yeah, well, I knew he was going to do that, but
But this is what I'm saying. So you're right. Your point is well taken. Walker Buehler could be the Chris Sale of 2025 without question. And I see it. I think it. Look, if we're talking on March 1st about the Red Sox making the playoffs, I'm a no. But if Walker Buehler goes out there and throws to a 2.5 ERA like he's capable of, then that changes it a lot. But he's coming off of massive injuries, and his first appearance in the majors last year for 6 games was not anything to be desired whatsoever. So if I'm sitting here on March 1st saying that, I can't put my stock in that, but I can put my stock in. I know Charlie Martin's going to show up and pitch 200 innings to roughly a 3 to 3.5 ERA because that's what he does. You know what I mean? And he may fall off the cliff because he's an old man in terms of baseball. But I know what the stats say right now. That's the thing about a preview show is that you have to. So you have feelings about the Red Sox, and that's awesome. I'm totally for that. I hope the Red Sox make it because baseball's better when several things happen. When the Braves, the Mets, when the Braves and the Mets are in the world's in the playoffs, when the Yankees and the Red Sox are in the playoffs, when the Dodgers are in the playoffs and the Giants are in the playoffs, baseball's better. Period. And the Chicago Cubs.
I think it's the other one. The rest of the division, like the Blue Jays made moves, but like I think it was roughly the same going out as the same going in.
Mm-hmm.
And the Orioles stayed pat, if not just lost big pieces.
No, they probably lost a piece, but I think
Yankees lost one of the best players in the world.
I think the O's are big believers for some reason.
The Rays stayed, did nothing.
I feel like
the Red Sox were the only teams that really did a lot in the
because they had to, though. They had to. They had no choice. They lost Chris Sale, which is a major cog in their wheel for a while there.
They had to lose him, though.
Well, he had to, but he lost himself because he got injured. But they had to shed him. But like, I think the Orioles, the reason why they didn't make any moves is because I believe they believe in their core and they believe in chemistry. I think that's their game. Plus, I think their owner is cheap. And he always has been. He always has been. Whereas the Yankees and the Red Sox will spend to oblivion because they can. Blue Jays, unfortunately, are exiled in Canada. And as much as I love Canada, that's always going to be a bad free agent draw. They almost have the reverse problem of Pittsburgh because I feel like Pittsburgh's a great baseball town. And if you're a fan, if you're a player in Pittsburgh and you win there, you will be lauded forever. I mean, look at Andrew McCutchen.
The perception is different, right? Like, so real quick, I know it's slightly off topic, but
off topic is good.
It's a smaller city than Philadelphia. It's a smaller city than most major cities.
Mm-hmm.
But it's recently had a revitalization with like data and stuff like that. So there's a lot more money in Pittsburgh than there used to be for a long time. But there is still a perception that like it's a third, like it's kind of like third tier, like kind of city. Like it's not a Miami. It's not a New York. It's not a LA. It's not a, and so like, but then anybody that comes here, you know, like they praise it. I mean, look at
my favorite stadium. It's my favorite stadium in baseball. I've been to 10 stadiums in baseball, and it's my favorite one.
Lives here permanently because he played here earlier. He never left, even when he got traded, because he loves the city. There's something about being here. Like once you're here, like, yeah. But the problem with the Pirates is one, the owner will never spend that money. Nope. And two, There, even if they wanted to, I don't think people would sign because they wouldn't have the trust that once they got here, they wouldn't regret it, right? Like,
because of track record. Track record plays a huge part. It's the same thing with the Orioles. I mean, the Orioles window might be closing very quickly because their owner does not spend, period. And until baseball pulls their head out of their ass, like if Rob Manfred really wants to do the right thing, he needs to fight the union and he needs to get a salary cap.
well,
If you
I mean, that's next year. I mean,
get,
right? The next year,
but the union's too strong. They'll never go against
they
the
have to
union.
renegotiate, right? Next year, right? Or
Doesn't
is it
matter.
2
It's not.
years from now?
I don't know. It's going to be the same thing as every time, though. It's going to be the same thing as every other time.
I did hear some rumblings in a few preview podcasts that, like, as much as everybody was excited, but there's already some people saying that there's going to be at least a few games lost next year.
I mean, if Major League Baseball, look, this TV contract, just to bring it back around, we can close it right here. To bring it back around, the TV contract to me is the first opening salvo to what might happen with the next labor negotiations, because there's going to come a point where Rob Manfred has to say, listen, our league is dying. It's a fact. It's just what it is. It's sad, but Major League Baseball is no longer a major player on the sports scene, on the entertainment scene in America, period.
Yeah,
End of story.
I mean, I agree with you.
Part of the
I agree with
reason
like
is
what you're saying, but
part
I
of the
don't.
reason part of the reason is, sorry, I just wanted to finish my thought here. Part of
Yeah.
the reason is that you have guys like Steve Cohen who understands that if you give Juan Soto $1 billion, he's going to make you $3 billion. Like, he understands that, but a lot of owners don't have that type of capital to compete. You have LA who can spend $1 billion on a player. You have the Yankees. The Yankees have even backed off. The Yankees, the evil empire. Remember the evil empire? That's what LA is now. LA is the evil empire now. The
No.
Mets will be the next evil empire because Steve Cohen will just spend his money. That's just it. And teams like Pittsburgh and teams like Kansas City and teams like Cincinnati, like, they can't compete. They just can't. And so until they get a salary cap and a salary floor, which is necessary because you have some cheap bastards out there, like in Kansas City.
Marlins,
And
Athletics.
the Marlins, exactly. The A's. You have guys out there who will not spend this money. You need that. If you're going to get a salary cap, you got to get a salary floor as well. And you got to make it competitive. I want to see a Cincinnati Reds and a Las Vegas A's World Series again. I want to see that again. I want to see the Angels be good. I hated the fact that Ohtani left the Angels. That killed me. I hated that. I hated that so much. So it's got to change. And if Rob Manfred really is smart about that, I think the TV contract is the first sign that Major League Baseball has slid down the ladder and they need to change something major, like in a big way. Salary cap is the way to go.
Maybe. I mean, like, but yeah, I believe the collective bargaining expires soon, like after this season. I can't remember if it's either this upcoming 26 or if it's 27. I just know that it was close enough that a lot of the
Contract.
preview shows were talking about it.
It expires December 1st, 2026. So we got 2 more seasons.
2 more seasons, but that's close. That's pretty close.
You got 2 seasons.
You have 2
So
seasons.
I hope the Mets and Juan Soto can win a World Series in the next 2 years.
And the possibility of possibly some work stoppage.
Yep.
And but like what I wanted to say earlier when you were talking, I hear your rationality. I think I agree with it a lot, some of it, not all of it, but I don't see that being the message to put out there from Major League Baseball though. From like reading the magazines, reading Manfred's statements and stuff like that, I get that they think they're on the upswing. They're not dying. They were dying, and now that they're coming back, and it seems like most of the messaging from the league to me is not what you said. It's more of like a no, this is the best we've been in a while.
Well, of course the league is going to say that.
Well, I'm just saying, like,
What are they going to say? We suck? Don't watch us.
well,
We're
no,
terrible.
but like, I mean, there for a while they were unwilling to admit that there was problems, and then they were willing to admit the problems, and they fixed the
Right.
problems.
So they made some
And now they're
changes.
saying no. Upon fixing these problems, we see all these I'm just saying I don't see, given like the public statements and stuff like that, Rob Manfred being that frank and saying what you said. I actually see him saying the opposite. Like we are building our way back to where we belong, which is number one sport in the world.
Yeah,
I think that's how they think about it.
Yeah, I think baseball has had a flawed thinking for a very long time. That's why it took them so long to do the pitch clock and fix the umpire situation. And like there's a lot of things that need to be done still that piss a lot of people off. The game's too slow. I mean, think of our society. We are a TikTok society. That's what we are. That's what we are right now. And you and I sitting here in our mid 40s, we wax poetically about baseball because we don't mind sitting and watching a game for 3 hours and understanding the nuance. But like my kids are the perfect example. My two youngest guys, they go to a Pittsburgh Pirates game with me every year. Every year. They're 16 and 14 respectively. And they love going to games. They loved playing baseball. They cannot watch it on TV. They can't. I've tried to sit my youngest guy who's 14. He wanted to learn how to play baseball. He was committed. He really wanted to do it. I'm like, okay, come over. We'll watch some games and and we'll, and I'll teach you the game. And I was doing all that. He got wildly bored, turned to basketball instead. That's what happened. He got bored. And it wasn't because I wasn't doing my part. I was making it as exciting as possible. I was taking them to games. We were going to minor league games. They love going to games because we are an event society. Baseball's not an event until you get to October. NBA is suffering the same problem. Don't be mistaken. The NBA regular season is dead on arrival. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. That's why they tried a in-season like playoff thing because it's dead. It's just nobody cares. It's more or less failed. Especially it failed this year because LeBron James wasn't in it. So they have a star power problem and their regular season sucks. But come playoff time, everybody's watching. Baseball
but that's
is
true of every sport to some degree, right? Like even
except for the NFL.
Yeah, but
Except
even the NFL, it matters a lot more differently.
I mean, the Super Bowl does, but their ratings are consistent from regular season to playoffs until you get to the Super Bowl. And the reason why the Super Bowl ratings are so out of control and high is because it's an event. It is the event. It's the event every year.
Yeah, it's the modern WrestleMania.
Yeah, sure. That's a good comparison. Yeah, back in the 80s, I remember WrestleMania was like the thing.
I know that sounds weird to probably other people, but who don't watch wrestling. But once upon a time, the Super Bowl didn't matter nearly as much as it did now. I remember when I was a kid, like hearing about it and stuff like that. Whatever. I never remember us ever sitting down and watching it though, unless the Steelers were in it, right? And then like I remember somewhere along maybe somewhere around 2008, 10, somewhere around there. All of a sudden, then if I go to visit my parents, they'd be watching the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I don't statistically that's incorrect. Statistically, it's been pretty consistent the Super Bowl since 1981 until 2009 when you said that's when the big jump happened. So that's when it went from like 90 million per game to like 110. And that was the major difference. So and what did you just say? You said 2008?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, so that I guess that checks out. That checks out. I mean, it was pretty consistently between, let me see, what did I say? 1981. Yeah. 85 million. A dip here, like there was 77, 73, 79, but it was always around 85 to 90 million, always until 2009, and then it went to 106.
But growing up in my mind, like WrestleMania was always like the Royal Rumble.
Yep.
But it was always WrestleMania first
Mhm.
because the very first WrestleMania, even though I was like 1 year old, I've seen it so many times after the fact. I feel like I saw it and remember.
Well, I remember WrestleMania 3 like it was yesterday.
Definitely remember WrestleMania 4 when the Hulk Mega Maniacs explode. That was like
Mega powers explode, brother.
That was like really like the first storyline where I really can vividly remember. I know I watched it. But like, okay, so like that, I remember like it slowly, like the first WrestleMania was like boom, and then like kind of like over time it kind of drifted down, but then like right about the beginning of Attitude Era, like WrestleMania became like what it is today, which is like the tent pole. It like was the biggest show, and it was the focus. Like pretty much the reason why I compare it with like football is WrestleMania is like the one thing where you get people who don't normally watch wrestling.
Well, it's an event. Again, like I said, we're an event society.
But I feel like WrestleMania was first, and then Super Bowl passed it.
I mean, the
At
World
some point.
Series was first. It used to be the World Series. Like,
Oh yeah, I mean,
when
but
you really,
we're talking like the 50s
no, I mean, even in the 80s, like think of 1986. Think of the Mets Red Sox. That was humongous. That was
oh yeah,
insane.
no, but I was just saying like, see, baseball's different. Like, I don't think we could really ever really comprehend like how big it was in the 50s and 60s. My
Well, 'cause
dad talks about it. My dad talks about it.
I mean,
Like
but how big could it have
you
really
could
been?
not escape the fact that the playoffs were starting.
But think
And
about the 50s. Think about the 50s for a minute. Like, if the Yankees and I don't know, the Giants were playing in the World Series, do you think someone in Kansas City was really paying attention? I don't think so. I'm not, I mean, I might be wrong, and I don't think there's any numbers to back it up because TV wasn't as prevalent as it is now, or it was in the 80s. There's like, I don't know, I don't think there are individual radio ratings. So being a professional broadcaster, I guess I should know that, but I don't think there's a specific like this game, the rating for this game on the radio was X,
I mean,
right?
there's ratings for stuff like that now.
Yeah.
But I don't know if maybe the 50s and 60s
But
they knew
the
for
point,
sure.
is that it's different now. I think
Yeah.
because we're in such a clipped society in terms of everything's got to be delivered in such a small package that baseball and it's 162 games every day.
Yeah.
It's a problem that I don't
That's the
know if
thing,
there's a
right?
solution
It's
to.
165 is like the thing. It's most major national things when they do talk about baseball, they complain about the length of the season.
Mhm.
I feel like if baseball like said like, okay, like build a narrative, right? Race to the trade deadline. And then like, okay, now transition race to the playoffs. And you had like that, and you like said, okay, actually it's only really all teams are only competitive to the All-Star break, right? Like really like, and then we start to get an idea of
Usually it's Memorial Day.
who's out and who's not, right? Like so like I feel like if they like kind of like found a way to kind of like half that in people's minds, the number of 165 or 162 or whatever is just so huge compared to like 16, or at least it used to be. Now it's 18, right? 165 versus 18 games. 18, that's a lot. If you found a way to like be like, okay, really, it's this amount, and now it's like the second half is more of like, okay, now you got to figure out who's gonna make the playoffs. Blah blah blah. I feel like that would help, but like, I think
I look, the length of the season it's not really it's a misnomer because when you really consider it, the length of the baseball season is only twice what the NHL and the NBA do, and that's because the NHL and the NBA don't play games every day. Whereas
but
baseball plays games every day. Like
yeah,
most teams will get one day off.
I don't think
It's every
that's
7 to 10 days. So like the length of the season doesn't mean anything. Like the NBA season is just as long as the baseball season. The NBA
oh
season starts in October
yeah.
and ends in June.
Hockey's sneakily long too.
Hockey's the same way. They start in October and end in June. But to most people, because the NBA season is so dead, they don't realize that the NBA season is 2 months in swing by the time Christmas Day rolls around. That's like the official in people's minds start of the NBA season is
Yeah,
Christmas Day. And
yeah.
now that's even been co-opted by the NFL by playing games on Christmas Day. So like they've kind of stolen NBA's thunder. The bottom line here, I think, with baseball is that they need to stop trying to be number one because they're not going to be. It's just what it is. You have the biggest star and arguably the greatest player any of us has ever seen in baseball with Shohei Ohtani right now. He's charismatic and he's interesting to watch and he pitches and he hits. Like he's everything you could have ever. He's the unicorn baseball player we've been looking for. And still, they will not beat out the NFL ever. Like it's just never going to happen. The only way the NFL loses this battle is if people just stop playing because of the head injuries.
Yeah,
that's the only way. But it's a gladiator sport, so people are still going to go out there and bang their damn heads because people love violence. This is what it comes down to. It's sad, but it's true.
Well, nonetheless, like, I think we had some interesting disagreements on the East.
Nonetheless, the Red Sox are not making the playoffs, and that's how we end this show.
Yeah, and the Yankees, Orioles, and the Blue Jays for you. For me, it's the Orioles, Yankees, Red Sox.
So you think 3 teams, but you agree with me that 3 teams are coming out of the East?
I don't see. I know it's a spoiler, but I just don't see the Tigers and Royals both being competitive this year. I usually, except for the Orioles, most young teams that spike like that always have a regression.
But do you think the Twins will return after their collapse?
I think they have bigger problems. I think.
Well, they're looking.
However briefly that window opened, it's closed.
Well, they're looking to offload. What's
many reasons why.
The guy the Mets almost signed. I forget his
but
name. Correa.
We'll get there in theory. But
in theory.
Okay. So
right.
we overshot our time.
Who cares?
I was aiming for like an hour. We hit 2 hours.
So I think you're still recording and doing whatever. I think. I don't know if you want to stop. We're live. Yeah, we're going out live. Let's
thank you for watching. I'm Rob. This is Chris. We're gonna do a baseball thing. I don't even think we've necessarily agreed on what we might call this, but thank you anyways. And we'll see you next time. All right. Okay. Hold on. And stream. Give me a second here.